Chapter 645. German girls were slightly taller, so they were around 1.7 meters tall at the age of 11 or 12, which was Gu Nianji's current height. So when Mother Hannah said she was only 11 or 12, it wasn't baseless. It was based on the standards of German girls. Gu Nianji resentfully changed into the dress Hannah gave her. It was a traditional German dress with a blue and white striped skirt and a lake blue top. There was a corset at the waist and chest, and the top part of the dress was a small vest style. The corset made her breasts stand out. She definitely wasn't a little girl who hadn't developed yet. Gu Nianji's mood improved and she clenched her fists. She wanted to eat. Being this skinny wasn't healthy, and she wouldn't have the strength to escape. After what happened at the convent, she didn't think she was safe now. She found a hairdryer in the bathroom and began to dry her hair. She stopped when it was half dry. As soon as she put down the hairdryer, she heard someone knock on the door. She opened the door with her hair down. Reinhard stood at the door. He didn't expect the little girl to change into a different person after a shower and a change of dress. Her long, black hair flowed down her back like seaweed and had natural curls. His fingers couldn't help but twitch, then he secretly clenched them to resist the urge to touch her hair. Her palm-sized face was still tender from a shower, and her cheeks were naturally flushed. Her plump and moist lips had a perfect shape. Gu Nianji looked at him in confusion, her upper lips slightly puckered like a seductive kiss. Reinhardz's gaze moved away from her lips unnaturally, but when he looked down, he saw her perky breasts. He immediately looked up at the sky. "Dinner is ready. Come eat." He turned and walked away. Gu Nianji smiled and nodded at his back. "Okay, I'll be right there." She returned to her room and braided her half-dry hair. She tied it up with her old rubber band and went to the kitchen. Hannah probably knew she was starving, so she prepared a sumptuous dinner. There was a deep white porcelain bowl filled with thick soup. It smelled like seafood, but it wasn't necessarily so. Gu Nianji thought, how could there be seafood here? Freshwater or lake food was more like it. Other than the plates in front of everyone, there were 5 oval-shaped porcelain plates. One had freshly roasted beef triangles on it, and another had several sticks of bread. Thankfully there were no blueberries on it. There was also a long porcelain plate with sliced white sausages. The 4th one contained a glutinous pig trotter and a long porcelain plate with a small cake that had just been baked. It smelled so good that Gu Nianji couldn't help but take a deep breath to calm herself. "Come and sit down. This is the clamshell soup I prepared especially for you." Hannah greeted her warmly and gave her a bowl. Gu Nianji couldn't help but take a spoonful. Sure enough, it was clam meat that had been cooked into a soup. However, she couldn't mistake the aroma. Reinhard smiled and cut a piece of bread for her. He placed a few pieces of white sausage on the porcelain plate in front of her and said gently, "Eat slowly, there's still a lot in the pot." Reinhard glanced at her. Just like before, he forked a piece of white sausage from her porcelain plate and ate it, then ate a piece of bread and some of her clam soup. He held his beer mug and smiled at her. Reinhard glanced at her. Just like before, he forked a piece of white sausage from her porcelain plate and ate it. Then he ate a piece of bread and some of her clam stew. Holding his beer mug, he looked at her with a smile. Gu Nianji glanced at her. Just like before, he forked a piece of white sausage from her porcelain plate and ate it. Then he ate a piece of bread and some of her clam soup. He held his beer mug and smiled at her. Hannah quickly said to Reinhard, "Reinhard, you have your own portion. Why do you always eat seriouses?" Gu Nianji understood that Reinhard wanted her to eat with peace of mind, so he took the initiative to eat all the food on her plate first. Gu Nianji smiled at Hannah sheepishly. "Let's eat together. It'll be more lively this way." "Sure." Hannah happily scooped a bowl of clam soup for herself and said, "Reinhard's brought this back from Berlin. He really likes seafood and so do I. It's just that we're quite far from the big city and the sea, so it's not easy to get it." "Can't you buy it online?" Gu Nianji asked curiously. "We're not in the range of online delivery." Reinhard smiled faintly as he took a sip of his beer. Gu Nianji ate a few mouthfuls of bread and thought of a question. "Reinhard, you work in Berlin?" "Yeah." "Then how did you get here?" Gu Nianji's eyes lit up. If Reinhard could travel from Berlin to the remote Alps, she would be able to find her way out. Even if she didn't return to Munich, she would be able to escape as long as she could get to a place with internet access. She was in such a passive position because her phone and internet were blocked. She was completely cut off from the outside world. Otherwise, those people would have come to rescue her a long time ago. Reinhard smiled at her. "I rode my motorcycle here. First, I took a plane from Berlin to Munich, then rented a motorcycle from Munich and rode it all the way here." Gu Nianji immediately recalled the cool motorcycle she saw in the backyard and let out a long "oh," as if she had a sudden realization. Hannah and Reinitz laughed together. The mother and son smiles were warm and genial, and people couldn't help but feel good about them. There was some truth to the saying that one's appearance was born from one's heart. Gu Nianji sighed inwardly as she gathered her courage to ask Reinitz, "Reinitz, when are you going back to Berlin? Can you take me out with you? I don't need to go to Berlin. You just need to take me out of this mountain and find the closest town." She was worried he would reject her, so she quickly said, "I'll pay. I won't freeload and let you take me back for free." Reinitz's smile faded as he looked down to take a sip of his beer. He said gently, "Yeah, I'll take you out. You don't have to pay." He then left. Gu Nianji keenly sensed that Reinitz's mood seemed to have soured. She carefully looked at Hannah and whispered, "Mother Hannah, is Reinitz unhappy?" Hannah raised her sparse eyebrows and said disapprovingly, "Is he unhappy? I don't think so." Gu Nianji was speechless. It was so obvious. How could she not feel it? Reinitz has always been like this. He has a good temper and is never unhappy or angry, Hannah said mysteriously to Gu Nianji. Also, we are women and he is a man. A man must give in to a woman, or else he won't be a gentleman and won't be able to find a wife. Gu Nianji was speechless. No way. Reinitz's looks were already above average when compared to the average handsome guy. He wasn't any worse than those so-called European and American male stars. Gu Nianji felt that her own sense of beauty was still there, so she only listened to Mother Hannah's words and didn't make any comments. She only said, "Reinitz is very handsome." "Mother Hannah, you must have seen too much of him, so you don't think so?" Then she spent the rest of the time praising Mother Hannah's delicious dinner. She also ate a lot. Mother Hannah was so sleepy that she went back to her bedroom to sleep, but Gu Nianji was still slowly eating her 7th white sausage. Reinitz had already finished smoking and stood outside for a while. He waited for the smell of smoke to dissipate before returning inside. At that time he saw that Gu Nianji and Hannah were deep in conversation, so he didn't disturb them. He leaned against the kitchen door and quietly listened to their conversation. Later, Hannah was sleepy and wanted to go to sleep, so Reinitz quickly moved to the side. Gu Nianji stood up to watch Hannah leave and didn't see Reinitz. When Hannah came out, she saw Reinitz but didn't say anything. She smiled and patted his shoulder before leaving. Reinitz looked at Gu Nianji with interest at the kitchen door for a while. Seeing that she was still eating, he walked in and sat next to her. He put his hand on her knife and fork and said gently, "You can't eat the last white sausage anymore. It's not that I'm stingy, but I'm afraid you can't take it. You'll have a stomachache at night." After starving for a few days, Reinitz instinctively felt that this girl's body wouldn't be able to take it. Gu Nianji's eyes dimmed. She thought of her strange body and the wounds that healed overnight. She said in a helpless tone, "So what? I said I won't eat and drink for free. I'll give you money." "Do I care about money?" Reinitz, who had always been gentle, finally became angry. "You only care about money? Even if you ate 100 white sausages, how much would that be? But your body really can't take it. Come, stop eating. Drink some milk, then go wash up and sleep." As he spoke, he very naturally wrapped one hand around Gu Nianji's neck and used the other to bring the glass of milk to her mouth. Gu Nianji couldn't help but open her mouth to take a sip of milk. Reinitz smiled and praised her gently, "Good girl." Then he urged her to wash up. "Go rest. I'll clean up here." When Gu Nianji first arrived, she had a small meal, and Reinitz had also cleaned up. Now he had to clean up again. Gu Nianji felt really embarrassed. "Let me help you." Gu Nianji stood up. "No, there's not much. I can make it faster." As Reinitz spoke, he stacked the porcelain plates. Gu Nianji had already finished all the food on the plates. He glanced at Gu Nianji and smiled. "It's a good thing that you can eat. I don't like it when little girls eat like little birds." Gu Nianji pursed her lips and smiled awkwardly. She whispered, "I'm not like this at home. I'm really starving this time." "Yeah." Reinitz glanced at her and didn't expose the lie she told him when she first arrived. But Gu Nianji was embarrassed. She stood next to Reinitz and watched him wash the dishes. She handed him the detergent and said shamefully, I actually got lost by myself." "I know." Gu Nianji, her face turned even redder. "I wandered around the mountains for a few days. I only ate berries, occasionally grilled fish and bird eggs." Gu Nianji told the truth. "I ate such delicious food today. I couldn't help it." "I said it's okay. I didn't let you eat because I was afraid your body couldn't take it." Reinitz used the back of his hand to gently touch Gu Nianji's stomach. "It hurts here." Do you want to eat some digestive tablets? Gunyenji shook her head with a smile. I'm fine. I should be fine, right? She wanted to test how strong her body could be. Reinitz didn't try to persuade her anymore. He quickly washed the plates and cutlery, wiped them and put them back in the closet. Gunyenji handed him the hand sanitizer for him to wash his hands. Reinitz laughed. His blue eyes gazed deeply at her as he asked her, "Don't you need to charge your phone?" Yes. Gunyenji quickly took out her phone. Do you have a charger for this iPhone? Reinitz looked at it and said, "This is last year's model. My phone happens to be the same model." He walked out of the kitchen and went to his room to get the charger. Gunyenji followed behind him and discovered that Reinitz's room was actually next to the guest room she had just showered in. Reinitz came out with the charger and saw that Gunyenji's expression was a bit strange. He thought about it and said, "The house is small, so please bear with it. There are only a few rooms. If you don't want to stay here, you'll have to stay with Mother Hannah." Of course, Gunyenji didn't want to stay with someone else. She immediately shook her head. It's fine. I understand." She then immediately said good night to Reinitz. Reinitz smiled and nodded. Good night. He then returned to his room. Gunyenji also returned to her room. Although the two rooms were next to each other, the soundproofing was probably pretty good because Gunyenji couldn't hear anything outside at all when she closed the door. She plugged the charger into the wall socket and plugged in her phone. At this time, her phone had less than 2% battery left. Thank the heavens. Her luck really had its ups and downs. Gunyenji's phone was charging, so she swiped it open to see that there were still 2 bars of signal. She tried the internet connection and it seemed like it could connect, but it was too slow. She couldn't even open text messages or receive any messages, so she gave up. She opened the contact list on her phone and wanted to call Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi again. This time the phone rang for a long time before it finally connected. It wasn't voicemail, but the operator of the Special Operations Forces switchboard picked up the call. "Hello, Special Operations Forces HQ Telecommunications Department. Who are you looking for?" Gunyenji didn't say anything and hung up in a daze. How could Yin Shixiang's number be picked up by the switchboard? That's impossible. Could there have been major changes in the Special Operations Forces during the month that she was gone? She held the phone and thought for a long time before finally deciding to try Qinlai's number. She dialed the number and it rang for a while before someone picked up. Gunyenji was overjoyed and quickly said, "Brother Qin, it's Nianji." The person on the other end seemed to freeze for a moment before a gentle female voice said, "Nianji? I'm Yizitan. Dr. Qin is currently performing a major surgery on the head of the military. It'll take another 10 hours. Do you need something?" Gunyenji immediately became discouraged. Brother Qin is performing surgery? Then tell him that I have something urgent to discuss with Brother Xiong and the others. I left a message for them but they haven't replied. Can you ask Brother Qin to help me ask Brother Xiong if they received my message? Yizitan replied amiably, "Okay, don't worry, Nianji. As far as I know, Lieutenant Colonel Yin and Lieutenant Colonel Zhao are also on a mission. They left more than 10 days ago. They can't bring their original phones when they're on a mission." Gunyenji understood and sighed in relief. It was good to know that they weren't purposely not answering her calls or replying to her messages. Although Gunyenji felt that Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi were definitely not traitors, she was still afraid that they would be used by the traitors. Now that she knew that they were on a mission, she could truly relax. "That's good then. Thank you, Dr. Yi," Gunyenji said briskly and immediately hung up. Yizitan also hung up slowly, a smile still on her face. She opened a small app on Qinlai's phone and clearly displayed the coordinates of Gunyenji's call. Gunyenji ate a full dinner and quickly became sleepy. She couldn't wait for her phone to finish charging before she fell asleep on the bed. It was supposed to be a sweet sleep, the most comfortable one she'd had in the past 8 or 9 days, but she was woken up in the middle of the night by a stomachache. She tossed and turned in bed for a while and finally couldn't resist going to the bathroom. When she came back, she thought she could relax a little, but within 2 minutes her stomach hurt again and she had to go to the bathroom again. After this happened a few times, Gunyenji secretly wondered if she had been poisoned, but she felt better after going to the bathroom. Her stomach was full and she finally vomited in the bathroom. She also had a slight fever, but it definitely wasn't the feeling of being poisoned. It was more likely that she had eaten too much at night. This was the consequence of overeating. When Gunyenji came out of the bathroom for the 5th time and crawled back to bed weakly, there was finally a knock on her door. "Sirius? Are you okay?" Reinitz's pleasant baritone voice rang out from the door. Gunyenji struggled to get up and leaned against the door to say weakly, "I'm fine." I'm fine. I just had a bit of diarrhea. I'm better now. You should go to sleep. She thought the room was soundproof, but going up and down to the bathroom a few times had indeed alarmed the person sleeping next to her. Gunyenji was very embarrassed, but her legs were so weak that she couldn't stand. She slid down the back of the door and sat behind it, panting. It was quiet outside, so Reinitz should have already gone back. Gunyenji sighed in relief and hugged her knees. She rested her head on them and her stomach ached again. She didn't want to go to the bathroom. She really didn't want to go, but it seemed like she couldn't not go. Gunyenji was struggling in her mind when she suddenly heard a click from the window. She looked up weakly and her eyes widened. She saw that the window of her room had been pushed open from the outside. Reinitz's tall figure leaped through the windowsill and walked to her side. He half knelt in front of her and reached out to the back of her neck to lift her head. What's wrong? Did you eat too much tonight? Chapter 646. Reinitz's tone was calm. He was only stating a fact and had no intention of mocking her, but Gunyenji still felt ashamed. She desperately lowered her head to prevent him from looking up. Reinitz didn't use much strength in the beginning. From the first moment he saw her, he felt that this little girl was too fragile. She was like the snow covering the top of the Alps that would melt as soon as the sun came out. He was worried that if he used a bit more strength, he would break the little girl's neck. However, the little girl was quite stubborn. She stiffened her neck and didn't let him look up. Reinitz used a bit more strength and Gunyenji finally couldn't help looking up. In the dark room, Reinitz's typical Germanic beauty suddenly magnified in front of her eyes. Gunyenji only felt dizzy and quickly looked away. She mumbled, "I'm fine." Reinitz pursed his thin lips and touched her forehead with concern. He scolded her lightly, "You're fine? You're already running a fever." As he spoke, he carried her horizontally and put her back on the bed. "Lie down for a while. I'll go get your medicine." "No need. I'll be fine after a nap." Gunyenji also touched her forehead. She had indeed started to run a fever. She should be getting better soon, right? Normally, a fever was also a sign that the immune system was starting to kick in. Therefore, many viral diseases would cause a fever. The body's own immune system would kick in and kill the invading virus. Only then would the body get better. However, Gunyenji wasn't sure if she had eaten too much this time or if a fever would work. Gunyenji drowsily fell asleep on the bed. In a daze, she felt like someone had put a cold towel on her forehead and fed her a slightly bitter medicine. She didn't want to drink it, but the person was very stubborn. He pinched her nose and forced her to open her mouth. In the end, she had to drink several mouthfuls of medicine. Gunyenji was very resistant and struggled to spit it out. The smell was so bad that she frowned. The person didn't seem to care at all. He brought water over to wipe her down and let her rinse her mouth. He then took away the dirty blanket and replaced it with a clean blanket for her. The vomit in front of the bed was quickly cleaned up. Only then did the person sit down again and continue feeding her medicine. Gunyenji had just felt comfortable for a while, but was forced to drink bitter medicine again. She began to cry. She was a patient. How could they treat her like this? She grumbled a few words in Mandarin. The man wiped her tears with a tissue. He didn't understand what she was saying, but he began to pat her shoulder to comfort her. At the same time, he continued to change the wet towel on her forehead and gave her medicine every once in a while. This position unexpectedly calmed Gunyenji down. After this round of torment, Gunyenji didn't go to the bathroom again. At most, she only muttered a few words when the man fed her medicine before falling asleep again. When Gunyenji woke up the next day, the first thing she saw was someone sitting against her headboard with his eyes closed. His left hand was supporting his head, and his right hand was constantly patting her shoulder. She looked up the man's arm and saw Reinitz's religiously handsome face. The person who took care of her last night was actually Reinitz. Gunyenji touched her stomach and found it didn't hurt anymore, but it still seemed like she had a fever. Her stomach was still uncomfortable, and she felt like vomiting whenever she moved. Reinitz's body trembled slightly and he woke up. He looked down and happened to see Gunyenji's large, black and shiny eyes. "You're awake? Do you still feel uncomfortable?" he asked her gently. His attitude was much gentler than yesterday. Gunyenji shook her head and nodded. She whispered, "My stomach doesn't hurt anymore, but my stomach still feels uncomfortable." Reinitz touched her forehead. "You still have a fever. You can't eat anything today. I'll make you another bowl of dandelion juice." So the slightly bitter medicine she drank yesterday was dandelion juice. Gunyenji didn't resist anymore. She grunted and asked curiously, "Did you make it yourself?" "Yes, Mother Hannah made it." People here have been sick since young, so we drink our own dandelion juice. Reinitz stood up as he spoke. After taking care of Gunyenji for a night, even someone as strong as Reinitz showed signs of fatigue. Gunyenji struggled to get up. I'll do it myself. You look very tired. Go get some sleep. I'm much better. I'm not sleepy. Reinitz smiled. Go to sleep. I'll be right back. He turned around and walked out, his tall body filling up the door. The door closed gently. Gunyenji heard Reinitz and Mother Hannah talking in hushed voices. Her heart was filled with gratitude as she slowly closed her eyes and fell asleep. She still didn't sleep well. She knew Reinitz and Mother Hannah took turns taking care of her. She didn't wake up until the evening. Reinitz was sitting on a small sofa in front of her bed, reading a book. His head was lowered, and from Gunyenji's angle she could see his long eyelashes. They were actually light gold and matched with his blue eyes. He looked exceptionally beautiful. However, Gunyenji found that she still liked Huashao's thick, long eyelashes and deep, dark eyes. She stared at Reinitz in a daze. Thinking of Huashao, her gaze softened. Reinitz looked down at his book and felt her gaze on him. He calmly looked up and saw that she was awake. He moved closer to tuck in the thin blanket. You're awake? Are you hungry? Gunyenji couldn't help but laugh. I don't dare to eat and drink to my heart's content anymore. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that her voice was very small. She had to pant a few times just to speak. She was extremely weak. Reinitz sighed. You're sick. Don't talk anymore. Rest well. Gunyenji shifted on the bed. She wanted to get up and go to the bathroom. She had slept in bed all day. Even if she didn't eat, she had drunk dandelion juice all day. It was hard not to want to go to the bathroom. So her strange constitution didn't work on diarrhea? What's wrong? Reinitz saw that Gunyenji didn't want to sleep. Are you feeling unwell? Gunyenji was crying. Brother, can you go out for a while? She looked at Reinitz, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Reinitz also stared at her. After a while he seemed to understand what she meant. He calmly stood up. I'm going out for a smoke. He walked out and gently closed the door. Gunyenji breathed a sigh of relief. She had a new understanding of Reinitz's ability to understand others. She lifted the thin blanket and got off the bed. There was a pair of furry slippers in front of the bed. The toes were actually shaped like a black bear cub. She looked at the slippers and couldn't help smiling. She thought about the intelligent black bear cub she had met on the other side of the mountain. She wondered if it still remembered her. Gunyenji thought about it as she put on the slippers. She stood up and walked only 2 steps before her legs gave way. She fell to the floor with a thud. Reinitz, who was at the door, flung the door open and saw Gunyenji fall on the floor in front of the bed. He quickly walked over to help her up and didn't say anything. He almost carried her to the bathroom door. He thought about it and pushed the door open. He walked Gunyenji to the toilet and had her hold on the sink next to the toilet. Once she was steady, he lowered his head and left. Gunyenji's face was so red it looked like it was burning. But there was nothing she could do. Her legs were still weak from yesterday's diarrhea, but she couldn't wait. Fortunately, Reinitz had already brought her here. She could take care of the rest herself. Gunyenji flushed the toilet with a red face. She slowly stood up with the sink and turned on the water to wash her hands. Reinitz heard it from outside. He knocked on the door and asked, "Are you done?" "I'm coming in." Gunyenji slowly walked to the door with the help of the wall. She opened the door and happened to see Reinitz. "Thank you," Gunyenji whispered. Reinitz didn't say anything else. He simply stretched out his strong arms to carry her and put her back on the bed. He pulled the thin blanket over her. "Sleep a little longer. You can eat something tonight. Otherwise you'll be too weak." Gunyenji nodded. She was already much better, but the diarrhea was very draining. She was very tired and couldn't even walk steadily. Lying on the bed with his eyes closed, Reinitz went out to discuss dinner with Hannah. Afterwards he made her a pot of Koik's oat seafood porridge. They didn't have rice, so they couldn't make rice porridge. They had a lot of Koiks and oats. Gunyenji didn't have the strength to eat it herself, so Hannah fed it to her. Humans were iron but rice was steel. After finishing a bowl, Gunyenji felt much better. She had slept all day, so she wasn't very sleepy. But Hannah was used to sleeping at 8:30 every night, so she quickly said goodnight and went back to bed. Reinitz ate dinner, cleaned up the kitchen and went to his room to shower. Gunyenji took the opportunity to take a look at her phone. It was already charged, but to her disappointment, there was no signal today. It was back to how it was a few days ago. Holding the phone, she lay on the bed and silently pondered what was going on. After Reinitz finished showering, he came to see if Gunyenji was asleep. He saw her lying on the bed with her eyes wide open. Her eyes were blank and it was obvious she was thinking about something. His gaze fell on the phone in Gunyenji's hand and seemed to understand something. He said to her, "This is the mountains, so the signal is often intermittent. Don't worry." Gunyenji was a little shocked. "Then how do you contact people outside the mountains? Don't you have a landline?" "This place is too remote, so there's no phone line here." Reinitz patiently explained to her, "Mother Hannah doesn't like to talk on the phone either. If something happens, she will go over the mountain to the ranger base. They have a phone and internet." Ranger? Gunyenji guiltily thought about the fire she set on the other side of the mountain and their ambiguous position. They definitely wouldn't dare to go to the ranger and walk right into the trap. Reinitz would take her out anyway, so she didn't need to go to the ranger. Gunyenji nodded. "I see." Then she stopped worrying about the internet and phone and asked Reinitz, "How long will you be staying this time? When do you plan to leave? Can you take me with you?" Reinitz smiled. "I was supposed to leave today, but you're sick. I can stay for another 2 days. "Oh? Won't it affect your work?" Gunyenji felt very bad. She knew that Westerners usually took annual leave for a fixed amount of time. If they exceeded it, they wouldn't get paid. "No, I have a lot of annual leave. I haven't taken it in years." Reinitz seemed to know her concerns and said tactfully, "Okay, go to sleep. I'll read here." Gunyenji knew he wanted to take care of her, and she didn't know if she would have a relapse at night, so she didn't refuse. She slipped under the thin blanket and said, "Then I'll sleep. Good night." "Good night." Reinitz smiled and put his hands in his trouser pockets as he stood in front of the bed and looked at her. Gunyenji closed her eyes peacefully and pretended to be asleep, but she actually just wanted Reinitz to be at ease. Reinitz looked at her for a while and bent over to tuck her in. He took the book he had been reading on the bedside table and continued to read. The lights in the room were turned off, leaving only a warm yellow desk lamp on. Gunyenji felt the atmosphere was very familiar, and the familiar environment made her feel very safe. However, she couldn't sleep now and didn't dare to toss and turn in bed. She just lay straight and silently thought about what to do next. Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi had actually gone on a mission more than 10 days ago. Calculating the time, it was just before her accident. Was this a coincidence or was it deliberate? There was also Smith and the others. They hadn't heard from her for so many days. Did they not have any suspicions? Gunyenji's mind was a mess and countless thoughts ran through her head. She had a vague bad guess, but because it was so frightening, she didn't dare believe it was true. Time passed slowly, and when Gunyenji came back to her senses, she found that Reinitz had already fallen asleep on the sofa. His breathing was long and soothing, just like his entire person, giving off a calm and gentle feeling. Gunyenji looked away and slowly sighed. She told herself that as long as she could leave the Alps and return to a place with internet and people, she would be saved. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to tell Reinitz tomorrow and ask him to take her away earlier. Closing her eyes, Gunyenji began to feel sleepy. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she suddenly heard the low roar of a motorcycle outside the window, but when she listened carefully, she couldn't hear it anymore. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly heard the rustling of the fence, followed by a dull thud. Gunyenji's eyes widened in an instant. She was about to sit up nervously when she saw Reinitz, who had been sleeping soundly on the sofa, suddenly jump up and quickly pounce to the window. He lifted a corner of the curtain to look outside. Gunyenji was much more energetic after lying down for the entire afternoon. She was no longer as unsteady as she had been in the morning. She climbed out of bed and silently put on her original clothes. She wore the nun's robe over it and carried her treasures inside. Her phone, charger, Reinitz's, a small bag of sanitary napkins, a Zippo lighter, a Swiss Army knife and her wallet. Putting on her sneakers, Gunyenji moved to Reinitz's side and looked outside. The starry sky outside was very bright. When she moved closer, she happened to see a few sneaky people holding guns and climbing over the fence. Then at the edge of the fence, one person stopped, lay on the ground and reached down. Then he pulled forcefully and pulled someone up from the ground. This movement was so strange. Could there be a trap near the fence? Reinitz seemed to know what she was thinking and said without turning his head, "To prevent wild animals, there are some traps near the fence." No wonder the sound just now was the sound of a person falling into a trap. Gunyenji felt very apologetic and whispered to Reinitz, "Thank you for taking care of me, but I have to go. These people are after me and I'll drag you guys down if I stay here." Reinitz suddenly turned around and looked at her deeply. His blue eyes were like the ocean, tolerant and thought-provoking. She nodded at him and turned to leave. Reinitz suddenly reached out and grabbed Gunyenji's wrist. You're still sick. How are you going to leave? Where are you going in the middle of the night? Gunyenji didn't look up. She looked down at Reinitz's hand holding her wrist. Of course I'm leaving the same way I came. Otherwise, how do you think I got here? Someone is after you? Reinitz narrowed his eyes. Bad girl, you're not telling me the truth. He didn't use a question but a statement instead. Gunyenji nodded shyly. Her voice was almost inaudible. Sorry, I didn't want to either. She struggled to break free from his hand, but Reinitz's grip was firm. She couldn't pry his hand away no matter how hard she tried. Come with me. Reinitz didn't let go of her hand. Instead, he took her hand and quickly left the room. He took her back to his room first and picked up a duffel bag from the sofa beside the bed. At the same time, he took out a gun from the drawer of the bedside table and stuffed it into Gunyenji's hand. He asked her, Do you know how to shoot? Gunyenji immediately trusted him even more when he handed her the gun. She nodded quickly. Yes. Hold it well and listen to my orders. Reinitz looked at her deeply again and suddenly hugged her head. He kissed her forehead. Be brave. Gunyenji closed her eyes tightly. Her neck stiffened as she awkwardly dodged to the side. However, Reinitz quickly let go of her and didn't intend to continue. Don't be afraid. He comforted her. I'll get you out of here safely. With that, he took her hand and continued walking. When they passed by Mother Hannah's room, Reinitz opened the door and woke her up. He simply said, There are bad guys. Hide quickly. Sirius and I will distract them. Then he pulled Gunyenji away. Mother Hannah was startled and quickly climbed out of bed. She put on her coat and hid in the basement. Where are we going? Gunyenji was a bit confused. Although the small wooden house didn't have many rooms, the hallways were full of twists and turns. She couldn't see the direction clearly. The backyard, of course, Reinitz said without turning around. Gunyenji's room faced the front yard. The sneaky people with guns had come from the front yard. And the direction Reinitz was pulling her was the backyard. Chapter 647. The two of them passed through the kitchen, and Reinitz pushed open the kitchen door to look around. The kitchen door faced the backyard. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The night sky was clear, and occasionally a few crows cawed in the woods. It was eerie in the middle of the night. At that moment, two sneaky figures also climbed over the fence in the backyard and fell into the trap with a thud. It seemed like the people in the front and backyard hadn't been spared. Reinitz held Gunyenji's hand and practically dragged her as he stumbled forward. His motorcycle was parked at the backyard entrance and was very close to the two people who had fallen into the trap. They ran near the motorcycle, and Reinitz kicked the wooden planks on both sides of the backyard door into the trap. The two people in the trap screamed and fired at the same time. Of course, the random bullets didn't hit their targets. Gunyenji didn't have the time to admire these people's wretched state. Reinitz had already put a large motorcycle helmet on her. Hold on to me, we're going now. Reinitz put his travel bag on Gunyenji's back and straddled the motorcycle. He turned to her and said sternly. The usually gentle person suddenly showed a decisive side, and Gunyenji couldn't help obeying his orders. She straddled the motorcycle behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Reinitz felt a burning sensation on his waist where she was hugging him. His eyes dimmed and he stepped on the gas. The motorcycle made a loud noise and startled the jackdaws in the night sky. What's that sound? The people who had groped their way into the front yard and backyard jumped in fright. By the time they reacted, they only saw a motorcycle speeding up the mountain road at lightning speed. The motorcycle's headlights drew a long curve, and in an instant, it was far away. What's going on? Did they already run away? Maybe it's a diversion. Yeah. I don't know if they ran away or stayed. The men in black discussed and split into two groups. Most of them went after the motorcycle, and a small group decided to set fire to the cabin. Gunyenji hugged Reinitz's waist tightly and pressed against his broad back. The motorcycle ran as fast as lightning, constantly bumping on the bumpy mountain road. Although he was wearing a helmet, he could still feel the mountain wind blowing past his ears. She looked up and saw that Reinitz wasn't wearing a helmet. She immediately understood that he had given her the helmet. Gunyenji was touched. She wanted to return the same kindness to all those who had protected her and treated her well. Reinitz gripped the motorcycle's handlebars with both hands and focused on slamming on the accelerator. He wasn't wearing a helmet, so he could hear the sounds of the pursuers getting closer and closer. These people also came here on motorcycles. The first thing that woke them up was the sound of the motorcycle coming to a screeching halt. If someone were to stand halfway up the opposite mountain, they would see a motorcycle running wildly in front, followed by 4 motorcycles on the narrow Alps mountain road. The headlights of the motorcycle drew a long arc in the night sky, converging into a river of headlights. The people on the motorcycle were like small boats floating in the river, swaying and swaying as if they would capsize if they were not careful. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bullets scraped the ground and flew towards Gunyenji's motorcycle, kicking up a large cloud of dust. "They're shooting." Gunyenji's voice trembled as she reminded Reinitz. "Hold on tight. Take out your guns. Get ready to shoot." Reinitz suddenly turned around and glanced at Gunyenji, then quickly turned his head to look ahead. Gunyenji already had her gun in her hand. As soon as Reinitz gave the order, she immediately turned to the side and calmly aimed at the tire of the motorcycle that was chasing them. She raised her arm and squeezed her wrist, pulling the trigger. Bang! Gunyenji's marksmanship was very accurate. With just one shot, she blew up the tire of the motorcycle at the front. Boom! The motorcycle instantly lost its balance and rolled down the mountain. The people on the motorcycle quickly jumped off to avoid the crash, but they were also seriously injured. They hugged their legs and rolled down the mountain with the motorcycle. The motorcycle at the front was knocked down, so the 3 motorcycles behind became Gunyenji's targets. When Reinitz heard the noise, he turned around to look and froze. He didn't expect this little girl's marksmanship to be so good. He turned around and took a deep breath before slamming on the accelerator again. The 3 motorcycles behind saw that the people on the motorcycles they were chasing were so accurate, so they immediately changed their route. They crisscrossed on the narrow mountain road and drove their motorcycles in all sorts of different ways. Gunyenji was dazzled and wasn't so lucky this time. She couldn't hit the target even after firing several shots. The people on the motorcycles behind saw that their countermeasures were working and couldn't help but be overjoyed. The situation immediately reversed, and the people on the 3 motorcycles behind started shooting at Gunyenji. Gunyenji panicked and yelled at Reinitz, "Can you slow down a bit? I didn't hit them." Reinitz tilted his head and listened. He held the motorcycle with his right hand and extended his left hand. "Give me the gun." "Aren't you going to drive?" Gunyenji was a bit worried. It wasn't a big deal that she couldn't hit them, but if Reinitz wasn't focused while driving, he would end up like the motorcycle that rolled down the mountain. "It's fine. Give me the gun." Reinitz spread his hands at her steadily. "Hurry." Gunyenji had no choice but to place the gun in his hands. Reinitz didn't turn around and tilted his body slightly to listen to the sound of the motorcycles behind him. As if he was trying to determine the location by sound, he raised his left arm and turned his wrist diagonally downwards. There was a crisp bang, bang. The wheels of the motorcycle in the back made an explosive sound, and the entire motorcycle suddenly fell forward. The people on the motorcycle didn't have time to jump off and were thrown forward by inertia. Immediately after, there were 2 gunshots. The 2 people who had just been thrown off the motorcycle were shot in the head and rolled down the mountain with the motorcycles. Gunyenji's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Under the bright moonlight, Reinitz's typical Germanic beauty was no longer gentle and warm. Instead, it was cold and indifferent. His superb shooting skills were only slightly inferior to Huoxiaoheng's, and he was better than anyone Gunyenji had ever seen. There were still 2 motorcycles left behind. Seeing that the people in the front were so powerful, they didn't dare to drive too close and deliberately kept a distance. However, they fired even more intensely at Gunyenji's side. No matter how fast Reinitz's motorcycle went, it couldn't outrun bullets. He didn't have time to retract his arm, and a layer of skin was grazed by the enemy's bullet. "Hold the gun." Reinitz stopped shooting and stuffed the gun back into Gunyenji's hands. "There's a cliff in front. Hold on tight. I'm going to lure them over." Gunyenji complained internally, but there was no other way. At this time, she could only trust Reinitz. After all, his shooting skills were so good, wasn't it? Reinitz gripped the handlebars with both hands and stepped on the brakes. The motorcycles behind suddenly realized that they were getting closer and closer to the motorcycles in front. They couldn't help but be overjoyed and madly stepped on the gas to chase after them. At the same time, they kept firing. However, Reinitz's motorcycle skills were very good. He drove in a figure-8 pattern on the road and constantly confused the people behind. When the other party felt that the target in front was within reach, Reinitz suddenly stepped on the gas again. The motorcycle made a deafening roar and suddenly accelerated forward. The motorcycles behind instinctively stepped on the gas and relentlessly chased after them. When Reinitz heard the motorcycles behind them getting closer and closer, He stepped hard on the gas and gripped the handlebars tightly. He used all his strength to twist to the left, and at the same time, he used his feet to support himself on the ground to slow down the motorcycle's inertia and make a sharp 90-degree turn. Gunyenji sat behind Reinitz and waited for the motorcycle to turn around. She was shocked to discover that the 90-degree turn on the mountain road was practically a corner of death, because the left side of the road was a hill going up and the right side was a cliff going down. If they didn't know the road and were driving so fast, they could fall even in broad daylight. Her heart was in her throat. Just as the motorcycle was about to slow down due to the sharp turn, Reinitz turned around and hugged her. Then he stepped on the gas pedal and used the reaction force to leap into the air. Carrying her, he dove down the hill on the left. There were many vines growing on the hillside. As soon as Reinitz jumped up with Gunyenji in his arms, he grabbed the vine closest to them and tried his best to stop the slide. Gunyenji clutched tightly to Reinitz's shirt and closed her eyes, not daring to look. The people on the two motorcycles behind them didn't understand what was happening and suddenly realized that the motorcycle they were chasing had already turned a corner and was already out of sight. They hurriedly stepped on the gas and chased after it. When they reached the intersection, they discovered that it was a 90-degree turn. The people on the motorcycles immediately felt that something was wrong, but it was too late. Although they slammed on the brakes, the turn was too sharp, the mountain road was narrow, and the cliff on the right was too close to them. Before they could react, they had already fallen off the cliff with the motorcycles. Reinitz held Gunyenji's head tightly in his arms and used his body to protect her. He grabbed the vine with one hand and held Gunyenji with the other. The two of them hung on the mountainside by relying on the vines. It wasn't as dangerous as the last time Gunyenji fell off the cliff. They finally got rid of the last two motorcycles chasing them and could finally catch their breath. Reinitz lowered his head to kiss Gunyenji's hair and said gently, "It's okay, Sirius. It's okay now." Gunyenji slowly opened her eyes and looked up at the situation around her. They were hanging on the mountainside, surrounded by vines and large patches of leaves that rustled when the wind blew. Fortunately, the hillside here was a bit flatter than the one Gunyenji had come from. It wasn't a straight cliff. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to hang on and would have rolled down a long time ago. Gunyenji poked her head out of Reinitz's arms and murmured, "Where is this? We can get out from this road." Reinitz shrugged and was about to continue speaking when he suddenly frowned and looked in the direction they had come from. He froze for a moment and couldn't speak for a long time. Gunyenji saw that Reinitz had suddenly become quiet and felt a bit strange. She looked at him, then followed his line of sight and was also stunned. She saw that Reinitz's home, in the direction of that beautiful wooden cabin, was burning with a raging fire. There were helicopters circling back and forth in the night sky, spraying white foam to put out the fire. Although it was far away, the fire was so bright that it didn't take much effort to see it. Gunyenji's heart suddenly shrank and she almost cried. "It's all my fault. Mother Hannah. Mother Hannah." If anything happened to Mother Hannah because of her, Gunyenji would never forgive herself for the rest of her life. Reinitz hugged her tightly in his arms. His voice was very low and very different from his usual gentle voice. He suppressed the emotions in his heart and whispered, "It's okay. Mother Hannah will definitely be fine." "How do you know?" Gunyenji's tears were already flowing. "It was such a big fire. The people who were after me must have stayed there. They split into two groups. Because the helicopter there is a ranger's plane. They came to put out the fire. When we left, Mother Hannah was already hiding in the basement. There's water there and another exit," Reinitz said calmly and gently. He wasn't completely sure, but he had to comfort Gunyenji like this. Seeing her sad, his cold and hard heart began to ache. "Really?" Gunyenji wiped her tears. "Then should we go back and take a look?" "No." Reinitz immediately objected. "There are still people after you. I suspect they have a backup plan. We can't go back." "But your mother?" Gunyenji was extremely apologetic. "Reinitz, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." "Don't say should or shouldn't." Reinitz cut her off. "Since it already happened, there's no should or shouldn't." He lowered his head and looked deeply at Gunyenji. His azure eyes looked a bit translucent in the night sky. Reinitz's expression was like the water in the glacier. Although gentle, it was also extremely cold. Gunyenji closed her eyes. "Then what should we do? What about you? What about Mother Hannah?" Reinitz thought about it and tugged at the vines. "We'll go up. There's a shortcut up the mountain. We can get out of this mountain." "Really?" Gunyenji suddenly opened her eyes. Her large, dark eyes looked like they could speak to Reinitz. Without the motorcycle and the possibility of something happening to Mother Hannah, Gunyenji's spirits had suffered a heavy blow. But now that she heard there was a shortcut, she perked up. Okay, I'll take you up. Rhinitz's right hand hugged Gunyenji's waist tightly. He tugged at the vines with his left hand and stepped on the rocks under his feet. The two of them climbed up a distance. Gunyenji was a bit uneasy. Rhinitz, let go of me. Let me climb up myself. It's too dangerous. Rhinitz refused to let go. I'll take you up. Trust me. Gunyenji could only shut up and focus on climbing with Rhinitz. The two of them climbed from midnight until dawn. They finally reached the top of the small mountain when the sky began to brighten. There was indeed an unknown path there. It wasn't a paved road, but a path that the people here made with their feet. There were weeds and wildflowers that looked like small lanterns swaying by the side of the road. Rhinitz finally let go of Gunyenji. He lay on the grass by the side of the road and panted heavily. No matter how strong he was, he would be exhausted after carrying an adult woman up the mountain in the middle of the night. Gunyenji knew he must be exhausted. She slowly moved to his side and sat down cross-legged. She whispered, "Rhinitz, are you thirsty? Do you want some water?" Rhinitz closed his eyes and shook his head. However, he said, "You have my travel bag on your back. There are 2 unopened bottles of water in there." Gunyenji reached into the bag and felt 2 bottles of water. But she didn't drink. There were 2 of them now, so they should save the water for when they were the most thirsty. Rhinitz saw that Gunyenji didn't speak and opened one eye to look at her. He asked, "Why aren't you drinking?" "I'm not thirsty." Gunyenji shook her head. "I didn't put in as much effort as you did." Rhinitz opened his other eye and looked at Gunyenji with both blue eyes. An extremely gentle smile blossomed on his face. It was like sunlight shining into a glacier, warming the water beneath it. Gunyenji looked away and looked in the direction of Mother Hannah's cabin. She murmured, "The fire is out. There's only white smoke left. Mother Hannah should be fine, right?" Rhinitz didn't speak for a long time. The two of them rested at the top of the mountain for a while before Rhinitz got up and said to Gunyenji, "If we follow this road for 2 days, we'll reach the small town up ahead." Gunyenji clasped her hands together and said to the sky, "Thank you, Rhinitz." She looked at Rhinitz and said solemnly, "Thank you, Rhinitz. I'll definitely reward you well when I get back." Rhinitz looked at her for a while and wanted to say, "I risked my life to save you just to covet your reward?" But looking at Gunyenji's extremely pure black eyes, he didn't say anything and only smiled helplessly. "Let's go." He took his travel bag from Gunyenji and carried it on his back. He lowered his head and walked forward. Gunyenji followed behind him with her hands tucked under the nun's robe. She looked back in the direction of Mother Hannah's cabin from time to time. Rhinitz turned around to talk to her, but seeing that she was still worried about Mother Hannah, he quickly said, "When we reach the small town up ahead, I'll call the ranger base. We'll know Mother Hannah's situation then." "Okay, you must call." Gunyenji was very cautious. "If you need special treatment, don't hesitate to tell me directly." Rhinitz looked at her meaningfully. "Serious, you make it sound like your family owns the big hospital." "My family doesn't own it, but I can try my best to help find a good doctor." Gunyenji said seriously, "For Mother Hannah's sake, I'll do my best." Rhinitz grunted and didn't say anything else. Gunyenji walked a few steps quickly and looked back as she said, "Really, you can ask for anything. Don't make Mother Hannah suffer." She didn't expect the grass on the mountain road to be so slippery. Gunyenji accidentally stepped on a particularly slippery patch of grass and fell forward. Chapter 648. Rhinitz heard her scream and quickly turned around to grab her hand to stop her from slipping forward. "Be careful, the mountain roads here are not easy to walk on." 09 Smalt say net. If she had really slipped, she would have rolled down the hill. Rhinitz was very worried about her, so he simply held her hand and led her away, not letting go of her anymore. Gunyenji was also shocked. She wasn't good at walking on mountain roads, so it was better to follow Rhinitz. The two of them walked in silence for a while. Rhinitz also looked back at Mother Hannah's house and suddenly said to Gunyenji, "I was adopted by Mother Hannah." Gunyenji was speechless. Rhinitz was lost in his memories. "I was an orphan and grew up in an orphanage. I was only adopted by Mother Hannah when I was 12. Rhinitz paused and felt a lump in his throat. "I'm very grateful to her. Without her, I wouldn't be who I am now." Gunyenji didn't know what to say. After a while, she comforted him sympathetically. "Mother Hannah is so kind. Good people will be rewarded. You'll be fine." "Really?" Rhinitz didn't seem to believe it. Is that what you Asians believe in? Good people will be rewarded? Yes. Gunyenji blinked. What's there to doubt about? Reinitz smiled and didn't argue with her. He continued, I was very naughty in the orphanage when I was young. No one wanted to adopt a naughty little boy. When I turned 10, I understood that if I was naughty, no one would be willing to adopt me, so I began to be obedient and well-behaved. But at that time I was already 11 years old, and very few people were willing to adopt children older than 10. Gunyenji glanced at the gentle and refined Reinitz. If it weren't for the ruthlessness and decisiveness Reinitz displayed when he fired the gun just now, Gunyenji would have always thought that Reinitz was a gentle gentleman. Of course he was also a gentleman now, but he wasn't gentle. He had his own edge and Gunyenji admired that about him. He acted when he needed to and didn't hesitate. But whether he was gentle or ruthless, it didn't match the word naughty. Gunyenji couldn't help but think about what kind of child Reinitz was when he was young. I was very depressed. I thought that I would never become good again. I wanted to continue being naughty and bad. When I was 12, Mother Hannah came to the orphanage and adopted me, Reinitz said lightly, his expression extremely calm. Gunyenji could only hold his hand to comfort him. Reinitz returned the handshake and smiled at her. So what you said about good people being rewarded, I hope it can come true. Then Mother Hannah would be all right. I will. Gunyenji nodded with absolute confidence. Reinitz pursed his thin lips and changed the subject. Do you know who the people who were after your life today were? Gunyenji felt that she had to be honest with Reinitz. Of course she had to be honest where she could be honest, and if she couldn't she was sorry but she still couldn't tell the truth. She thought about it and chose what she could tell Reinitz. I'm a lawyer and I offended a very powerful person. 9 days ago he set up a trap to kill me but I managed to escape. And then? Reinitz didn't ask who she offended and only asked how she escaped. I rolled down the cliff and landed on the other side of the mountain. Gunyenji pointed to the mountains across from them. Later they chased me again. I panicked and ran through a small cave over there. 09 small say net. Yeah, I know that small cave. I used to play there with my friends when I was young. Reinitz nodded and believed Gunyenji's words. Really? You have friends? Gunyenji asked curiously. Didn't you say that Mother Hannah's family was the only one in a 5-mile radius? That's right. There used to be other people living here but they all moved away. In the end, Mother Hannah was the only one left. Reinitz was very emotional. After I went to university, I went to work in Berlin and came back once a year. Oh? That's such a coincidence. Gunyenji sighed from the bottom of her heart. You see, good people are rewarded. I helped others, so when someone tries to harm me, I can meet a good person to help me. She purposely looked at Reinitz to indicate that he was a good person. Reinitz looked at her with a smile and deliberately said, but lawyers are usually bad people. It's all in the movies and on TV. Gunyenji was speechless. His words made so much sense that she was actually speechless. I'm just kidding. Reinitz was in a better mood and changed the topic again. Logically speaking, you jumped off the cliff. The Alps are so big and uninhabited, so it shouldn't have been easy for them to find you. I also find it strange. Gunyenji tilted her head and thought about it. In the beginning there were 4 fake police officers chasing me. I could explain that it was because I called the police and that the police officers were in cahoots with the bad guys. Then in the nunnery I could also say that it was the Reverend Mother who called the police. But then I met the hunters and the people who chased your house. I can't explain that. Actually, she had a vague guess in her mind, but it didn't make sense. So she kept wondering if she had overlooked some details. I still think there must be a reason. Reinitz also analyzed for her. If you weren't alone and were with friends, I could say that someone might have betrayed you. But you were always running for your life. Who would betray you? Who would betray you? Gunyenji nodded and thought deeply. Yes, I was always alone. How did those people find me? They found me so accurately and in such a timely manner. It was almost as if I had betrayed myself. After saying that, she suddenly froze. How could she have forgotten? Her phone. All she could think about was that Smith and the others' phones might have been installed with a Trojan horse, so they could intercept her calls and texts. But what about her own phone? She was very sure that her phone wasn't installed with a Trojan horse, but as long as it was a phone, it would emit a signal when it was turned on. Regardless of whether there was a base station nearby, it would automatically search for a network it could connect to. Gunyenji quickly remembered that when she saw the nunnery, she immediately turned on her phone to search for a signal. Similarly, when she saw Mother Hannah's cabin, her first reaction was to turn on her phone to search for a signal. She still remembered the ecstasy she felt when she saw 2 bars of signal on her phone, and after every ecstasy, there would be a chase after her like a shadow. It was as if these people knew where she was. Reinitz's words just now reminded her that in a wild area like the Alps, how could these people accurately find a person's location in the vast mountains? This kind of technical method was no less than looking for a needle in a haystack. But what if this needle had a positioning system? For example, Europe's Copernicus satellite positioning system. Then this satellite positioning system could completely locate the needle, with a margin of error of less than 10 meters. A range of 10 meters was nothing to the ocean or the mountains. It was like exposing herself to the enemy. Gunyenji raised her phone and looked at it expressionlessly. She really didn't think that the other party would have the ability to mobilize Europe's Copernicus satellite positioning system. Most people knew that cell phone signals could be tracked by satellites, but Gunyenji knew from the Nanda satellite positioning system incident that it took a lot of energy and cost to use satellites to track a specific cell phone signal. In order to track a specific cell phone signal, the satellite orbit change alone would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the large team cooperation needed to achieve the effect of shadow following. It definitely wasn't something that could be tracked easily, and not any small fry's phone was worth tracking. So in the beginning she didn't even think about it. Now that she understood this logic, she wanted to give herself a thumbs up. She was so valuable that it was worth spending hundreds of millions of dollars to take her life. How awesome. So she had to protect herself well. She couldn't lose such a valuable life for nothing. And the identity of the person behind the scenes was even higher than she had previously estimated. Gunyenji sneered in her heart. It looked like the other party was pressuring her step by step, but the truth was that they were at their wits' end and were giving themselves away more and more. Because there were really only a handful of people who could mobilize Copernicus satellite positioning system. Reinitz turned around and his heart also jumped. Is there a problem with your phone? They have someone who knows my phone number, so when I turned it on, they used the satellite positioning system to find my location. They really think too highly of me. Gunyenji's voice was flat as she pressed the open button on the phone. After scanning her fingerprint, she opened the phone and entered setting. She pressed reset everything, reinstall, destroy all records. Everything inside was reformatted and erased, so the phone returned to its original state. The iPhone's sapphire screen flashed a few times, then dimmed and went out. Gunyenji looked at the phone that had accompanied her for 2 years and fondled it reluctantly for a while. Then she asked Reinitz, is there a lake or a river nearby? Yeah, the most important thing here is a lake or a river. Reinitz knew what she wanted to do, so he led her onto a path that led down the mountain. The two of them didn't go far before Gunyenji saw another lake. It was even larger and deeper than the one she saw near Mother Hannah's house. The sky and clouds were reflected in the lake, and it was so blue that it was hard to tell where the sky was and where the lake was. Gunyenji looked down at her phone and gritted her teeth. She suddenly raised her arm and drew a beautiful arc in the air before throwing her rose gold phone. What? The water splashed on the surface of the lake and drowned the rose gold mobile phone. After throwing the phone into the lake, Gunyenji felt empty in her heart. It was like she had lost her support and had nothing to rely on. Let's go. Reinitz gently hugged her shoulders. It's okay. When we get out of here, I'll give you a phone. Gunyenji snapped back to reality and smiled at Reinitz. She shook her head and said, it's okay. I don't want to use a phone for now. If I need one, I can buy it myself. Reinitz didn't force her. He took her hand and walked up the mountain path. That's fine. You can follow me until your parents and relatives come to pick you up. Gunyenji was sad. I don't have parents. After saying that, she felt something was wrong. I don't have a mother. I only have a father. You just found me. Reinitz seemed a bit surprised. He stopped and looked at her gently. You were also an orphan when you were young? A child whose parents weren't by their side could be called an orphan, right? Gunyenji actually still didn't know what her background was. Although her father had been found, her memory hadn't recovered. Her experiences from childhood to adolescence were blank. A person without a childhood wasn't a complete person. However, she didn't say much to Reinitz. She only nodded. I guess so. I didn't know I had this father until a few months ago. Then wait for your father to pick you up. He won't come to pick me up. He's been in a vegetative state for many years. Reinitz didn't expect that when this seemingly delicate and weak little girl said those words, she didn't feel so much pain that she wanted to die, nor did she resent the world. She just said it calmly as if she was talking about someone else's business. His feelings became more and more complicated. Holding her hand tightly, Reinitz didn't say anything else. He simply said, "It's okay. You have me in the future." Gunyenji smiled. "Reinitz, thank you for comforting me. But I'm already an adult and don't need a guardian anymore." Reinitz fell silent and continued walking. After a while he said, "I know. I meant that you can follow me until you get home safely." "Okay, then I'll have to trouble you." Gunyenji didn't refuse. At this time she really needed someone like him to help her get home. It wasn't impossible for her to rely on herself. If she insisted on leaving, Reinitz would let her go, but Gunyenji thought that would be too impolite. She didn't want to leave a bad impression with someone who was unconditionally good to her. "When we get to the small town up ahead, I'll find a place to go online and call my family. It should be much safer without my own phone." Gunyenji sighed and looked at the road ahead. It wasn't as bumpy and winding. The two of them walked for a day. Gunyenji, who had been walking alone in the Alps for 8 or 9 days without any problems, fell ill again just as she was about to see the light. She was dizzy from the fever and relied on Reinitz to carry her step by step out of the mountains. Today was the 10th day since Gunyenji had left the hotel. Smith and his 3 colleagues had been restless since 3 or 4 days ago. They had received a text from Gunyenji saying that she was visiting a friend and would be back in 10 days. At the time, they hadn't thought too much about it because they were already busy with work. Also, they had received news the day after Gunyenji left that Seth had escaped from the hospital. They had kept an eye on the police, hospital, and court to urge them to arrest Seth and bring him to justice. They had been busy for 6 or 7 days. They were too busy, so Smith said he wanted to call Gunyenji and ask if she could come back earlier. There were too many things to do and the 4 of them couldn't handle it anymore. In the end, the 4 of them had called countless times since that day, but they couldn't get through. Every time they were sent to voicemail. When they couldn't get through the first time, they didn't care and thought it was just a lack of battery. But in the next 3 days they couldn't get through. Something was wrong. Although the 4 of them were anxious, they remembered that Gunyenji had said 10 days. Perhaps she didn't want to work and simply turned off her phone when she was on vacation. Smith and the others were the same sometimes. If they really wanted to go on vacation, the only way was to turn off their phones or not bring them with them at all to get rid of the endless work. They thought Gunyenji was in the same situation. But today Gunyenji should be back no matter what. Even if she didn't come back, she should have called or sent them a text to let them know. In the end, they waited from sunrise to sunset and didn't receive any news from Gunyenji. When they called again, the phone was already out of service. Smith paced around his room with his arms crossed. The other 3 lawyers sat on the sofa in his room, all looking worried. They didn't speak, but they could see the worry and anxiety on each other's faces. Smith stopped pacing around. "You're making me dizzy." One of the lawyers pressed his hand down. "Sit down. Everyone, let's discuss what's going on." "I think something happened to Lawyer Gu." Smith put down his arms, his expression grim. The lawyer's intuition told him that Gunyenji was probably dead since there had been no news of her for 10 days. And if something really happened, they would have missed the most precious 36 hours. The precious 36 hours would have passed before they realized Gunyenji was missing. If they couldn't find the missing person in the first 36 hours, the chances of finding her again were too small. Smith and his 3 colleagues were all gloomy and angry. They actually only discovered Gunyenji after she disappeared for 10 days. Were they pigs? They were too slow. They had thought that she had gone on a trip with friends, but now they knew that there might have been an accident. The 4 of them all thought of the past Gunyenji. Actually, they weren't particularly familiar with her. She was always reading and studying in her room. She had always been so quiet and only came out to talk to them and have meetings when needed. The rest of the time she was studying, writing trial summary reports, or learning German with a translator. She was busy and happy. In addition, when they joked with Gunyenji in the past, Lawyer He's cold face would appear in front of them, and then they would find themselves in all kinds of disadvantageous situations. Therefore they all tacitly stayed away from Gunyenji and the trouble of being attacked by Lawyer He. So when they realized that they hadn't heard from her for a long time and couldn't get through to her on the phone, they realized that she was probably missing. The 4 of them discussed anxiously in the hotel room for a while. "Smith, should we call the police?" one of the lawyers asked uncertainly. Chapter 649. Smith thought about it and shook his head. "Let's look for it ourselves. I don't really trust the police system here." The other 2 lawyers agreed. "We're not familiar with this place, and we're here to represent our clients against the German police and government. I think it's best not to call the police for now in case there's a misunderstanding, and we don't want to make a big deal out of this." Smith wagged his finger. How about this? Let's go to the hotel and ask for the surveillance footage from the past 10 days and see if we can find anything. They showed their lawyer identities and asked for the surveillance footage from the Hilton Hotel. Although the management of the Hilton Hotel wasn't very willing, for the sake of the largest law firm in the United States, they still made a copy of the surveillance footage of the hotel's entrance and back door for the past 10 days. The surveillance footage didn't involve the client's privacy, so it was fine to let them see it. But of course, the four lawyers weren't satisfied with only the surveillance footage from the entrance. What if Gu Nianji was killed by someone from the hotel? This was not unheard of. For example, there was a very famous case that happened in New York a few years ago. A young woman suddenly disappeared and was found naked in a cistern on the roof of the hotel she stayed in. The cistern was 2 meters high and covered with a very heavy cement lid. It required several strong men to lift the cement lid, but the New York police ruled it as suicide. The four were all relatively famous lawyers in the United States, and because they had seen too much chaos in the police system, they didn't blindly trust the police's ability. Also, Gu Nianji's sudden disappearance was too strange, and they didn't dare trust the German police. Smith's expression was cold as he yelled at the Hilton Hotel's security director. If something happens to our colleague in your hotel, can you bear the responsibility? I can guarantee that if something really happens to her here, your Hilton Hotel will not be able to continue operating in the world. The Hilton Hotel's security director's face flushed and paled as he glared at the imposing lawyers. In the end, he reluctantly asked for permission from his superior. In order to keep the peace, the Hilton Hotel's management agreed to make copies of the surveillance footage from all the corridors in the hotel for the four American lawyers to see. With the surveillance footage from inside and outside the hotel, Smith was confident they wouldn't miss anything, so the four of them each distributed a portion of the footage and began working overnight. Everyone stared at her for the entire night. Their eyes were bloodshot, but all they saw was Gu Nianji's figure leaving the hotel early in the morning 10 days ago. However, they clearly saw that she had left the hotel in their commercial car. Ever since that time he had never seen her return. The time she left also matched the last time she used her access card. Smith perked up a little and immediately called the driver of their business car. He pretended to have something urgent and asked him to come to the hotel immediately. He said that he needed his help with something important and that the price would be extra. The chauffeur was so happy that he arrived at the Hilton Hotel within 5 minutes. Smith and the others invited him to the small conference room in the hotel room. They quietly turned on the video recording on their phones and asked him casually, "Did you send Lawyer Gu out 10 days ago? Where did he go?" The driver quickly said, "Oh yes, I remember. Lawyer Gu said she wanted to go to the Königssee to see a friend and asked me to take her there. It's about a 2-hour drive from Munich." 09 Smalt say net. After the driver finished speaking without waiting for Smith to continue asking him, he said, "How did Lawyer Gu come back? Did she call another car? She said she was only staying for 1 day and would call me when she returned at night. I waited for her there for 2 days but she didn't call. Did she have too much fun and forget to go home?" Just as he finished speaking, the driver realized that he had said the wrong thing and immediately changed his words. "Oh no, she stayed for 10 days. I forgot it was 10 days. As he spoke, he narrowed his eyes slyly to avoid Smith and the others' gazes. He was extremely regretful. After so many days, these lawyers had only asked him about the situation at the time. In his excitement, he had forgotten what the person had asked him to say and told them the truth. Fortunately, he remembered to salvage the situation. He hoped that these people wouldn't mind his slip of the tongue. Was it 10 days or 1 day? How can you remember something like this wrongly? Smith crossed his arms and frowned at the driver. It's been so long. How can I remember it so clearly? The driver was very sly and asked carefully, "Is Lawyer Gu back? You can ask her yourself." "If she's back, will we still ask you?" Smith glared at him. "Think about it carefully. Did Lawyer Gu tell you it was 1 day or 10 days? When the driver heard that Gu Nianji hadn't returned, his heart skipped a beat. He was a little afraid. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and told the truth. "Seems to be 1 day. Yes, it should be 1 day. It's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask her." The four lawyers were all speechless when they heard this. It couldn't be, right? First of all, Gu Nianji had texted them that she would be out for 10 days, but she had personally told the driver that it was only 1 day. She had also said that she would return at night and would call him to pick her up. Was it 10 days or 1 day? This was the first point of contradiction. After losing contact, Gu Nianji's phone couldn't get through. It kept transferring to voicemail and in the end, the phone is not in service. Unusual to unusual. At night, the four of them met in Smith's room, their expressions grim. Although they were very reluctant to admit it, they had to admit that Gunyenji was probably missing. It was definitely not that she had gotten lost, but that she had fallen into someone's trap. Whose trap could she have fallen into? Gunyenji was a citizen of the Wuxia Empire and had come to Germany specifically to fight lawsuits. If she had offended someone, it could only be Seth and his family of lawless tyrants. The four of them looked at each other and understood what everyone was thinking from their eyes. Although lawyers were only representing clients in lawsuits and had no direct interest in the other party, being a lawyer was directly linked to the law. It was truly too easy to attract hatred, so it was common for the defendant to harm the plaintiff's lawyer, or the plaintiff to harm the defendant's lawyer. Could it be Seth's family? His stepfather York isn't easy to deal with, one of the lawyers said coldly. We've already investigated his background. It's definitely not clean. Don't forget Seth also escaped. Although the report from the hospital was from 9 days ago, that was when they discovered that he had escaped. If we push back the time of his official escape slightly, it might coincide with Lawyer Gu's disappearance. Smith was the first to think of this possibility, and his heart shuddered. It wasn't because of anything else but because when he and Gunyenji went to the hospital to see the seriously injured Seth, the way Seth looked at Gunyenji was truly abnormal. Oh? It really has something to do with that perverted B*TC Seth? Then what should we do? No one knew better than the lawyers who knew the details of Li Haiqing's case what kind of scum Seth was. Let's call Lawyer He first. Tell him clearly before calling the police. Smith rubbed his temples. We can't delay it any longer. There's still no news from Lawyer Gu. I'm very worried. What were they worried about? Everyone looked at each other and had a tacit understanding, but no one dared to say it out loud. It was as if their worries would come true if they said it. As long as they didn't say it out loud, Gunyenji would be safe. Everyone prayed in their hearts that such a despairing and terrifying thing wouldn't happen to Gunyenji. Although they didn't know Gunyenji personally, they had been on the same page for the past month. They also admired this hard-working and smart female lawyer from the Wuxia Empire, so they couldn't bear her getting into an accident. They even dared to touch a lawyer. I think the German legal system isn't just your average level of evil. After the four of them finished their discussion, Smith called Hijichu on the spot. However, after dialing Hijichu's number for a full hour, all he got was a voicemail message. The other three were very surprised and also took out their phones to call Hijichu's number. He called his personal phone, and even the Wuxia Empire's B University professor's building, but none of the calls actually went through. They all got voicemail. Smith stared at his phone and muttered, "Didn't he say he went home? Where did he go? Antarctica? Or the North Pole?" He didn't even pick up the phone. Forget it, Smith. A few of his colleagues comforted him. Aren't we the same when we're on vacation? He doesn't even answer our work calls or emails. This was a vacation. Why else would they go on vacation? Wouldn't it be better to just work overtime? One of the lawyers added, also lawyer he said he'll be back in 2 weeks at the latest. He'll be back in 4 days so we'll see when the time comes. Smith thought it made sense but Gunyenji's matter couldn't wait any longer. How about this? Smith hesitated. We still have to call the police. Also, Lawyer Gu is a citizen of the Wuxia Empire. If something happened to her, we have to notify their embassy. If Gunyenji was a U.S. citizen, they would have gone to the U.S. embassy already. Unfortunately, she wasn't, so they could only go to the Wuxia Empire's embassy in Munich. After discussing the order, they finally decided to split into 2 groups and act at the same time. One group would go to the police, while the other group would report to the Wuxia Empire's embassy in Munich. Smith had more contact with the police, so he and another lawyer went to the police station to report. The other 2 lawyers knew a bit of Chinese, so they went to the Wuxia Empire's embassy in Munich. What did you say? Your lawyer is missing? The officer in charge of missing persons cases at the Munich police station looked at Smith and his colleagues as if to say, "Are you kidding me?" Smith had been at the Munich police station every day for the past few days because of Seth's escape from the hospital. He urged them to quickly arrest the fugitive so everyone there was familiar with him. Some police officers understood and sympathized with him, but others hated him and felt he was interfering with their work. Also, their accusations had tarnished the reputation of the German police, so they weren't friendly toward him. Now that he had come to make a report, a few police officers took pleasure in his misfortune and kept making things difficult for him. Smith was infuriated by them, but he couldn't do anything. Missing? Do you think it's that easy to file a missing person case? If she was a minor and lost contact for 24 hours, it could indeed be reported as missing. Unfortunately, she's already 18 years old and is an adult, so. The Munich police officer refused to accept Smith's report. Smith sneered and propped his hands on the officer's desk. He stared straight into his cloudy gray eyes and enunciated each word clearly. Oh? Now you think 18 years old is an adult? Then how can the son of your colleague, who's 21 years old, be called a minor by you? Doesn't your German law say 22 years old is considered an adult? Tell me I fought a fake lawsuit. Or did Germany come up with a fake law? How could this police officer be a match for an elite American lawyer when it came to arguing with the law? The officer's face flushed red from Smith's rebuke and couldn't find a way out of it. He angrily pounded the desk and said, "If I say she's an adult, then she's an adult. As for your lawsuit, ask the judge. What does it have to do with me?" That's right. Maybe the disappearance was just a misunderstanding. Your colleague is already a practicing lawyer. Is there a need to rush to report a case? The officer's colleague also chimed in. Also, a missing person case can only be reported by immediate family members. Which one of you is her immediate family member? Seeing the arrogant lawyers in court being defeated, the police officers were secretly pleased. Too many times the suspects that the police worked so hard to catch were exonerated by glib-tongued lawyers and couldn't be convicted. But they didn't consider that lawyers had also helped the police and prosecutors a lot by helping them convict suspects. It could only be said that some people only remembered how others treated them badly and completely forgot about how others treated them well. Smith was blocked by the police officers. He wasn't someone to be trifled with. He pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose and said righteously, "It's precisely because you said my colleague is an adult that we don't need immediate family members to report a case about her. I think you're just spouting nonsense. What legal provisions? They're all *T to you. Whenever you need an excuse, just pick one. I don't care if your words are contradictory or not." Trying to reason with us? Don't you know we're the police? We're a violent law enforcement agency, not a reasonable one. The police officers in the office rolled their eyes. If you want a reason, go to court. The door is over there. Goodbye. How can you do this? We're law-abiding citizens and followed legal procedures to report a case. How can you treat us like this? Smith slammed the table. Have you thought about the consequences? What consequences? We're also law-abiding citizens and followed legal procedures. The law has never said that colleagues can report cases as immediate family members. Smith and his colleague could only leave angrily and think of another way. The other two lawyers who went to the Wuxia Imperial Embassy in Munich were treated much better than Smith and his colleague. As soon as they said they were the plaintiff's defense team for Li Haiqing's case in the reception room, the embassy staff immediately warmly invited them in. When they arrived at the small reception room of the embassy, the deputy consul warmly received them. "You're members of the American team, right? Thank you so much for your wonderful defense and bringing justice to the case of the overseas students from our country. We will remember you." The deputy consul was a middle-aged man in his 50s. He maintained himself well and looked like he was in his early 40s. The two of them quickly said humbly, "We're here for our lawyer, Lawyer Gu. She's also a citizen of the Wuxia Empire." "It's Lawyer Gu. Yes. She's very good. I listened to her argument in court. Her English was so fluent there was no accent at all. Perfect Oxford accent." The deputy consul chuckled and complimented Gu Nianji. The two lawyers saw that the deputy consul was very helpful, so they immediately struck while the iron was hot. Yes. She's very good. Although she's young, she's extremely smart and hard-working. She's the main trial lawyer for this trial. She's very experienced. Our country's female lawyers are indeed very good. The deputy consul was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. However, he didn't forget what the two American lawyers had just said, so he asked, "You just said you're here for her. What's going on?" "It's like this." The two American lawyers became serious. One of them spoke first. 10 days ago, Lawyer Gu told us that she was going out to meet a friend and said she would be back in 10 days. In the end, we couldn't get through to her cell phone for the past 10 days. Every time we called, it was transferred to voicemail. When we called her cell phone yesterday, it wasn't in the service area. We were worried. The other lawyer continued, "We felt that there was a problem, so we got some people to investigate Lawyer Gu's whereabouts. In the end, we found our charter driver. He said that 10 days ago, Lawyer Gu personally told him that she was going to the Königssee for a day and would call him to pick her up at night. But the driver waited until now and she still hasn't called. The deputy consul understood what they meant and stopped smiling. He frowned and thought for a while. You mean, Lawyer Gu? Disappeared. The two American lawyers said together, our other two colleagues have already gone to the Munich Regional Police Station to report the case. The two of us specially came to inform you. After all, you are the embassy of Lawyer Gu's country and have an obligation to protect your country's citizens overseas. That's natural. Not to mention that she's a lawyer who was entrusted by Minister Bai to come to Germany to fight a lawsuit for her compatriots. Even if she's an ordinary overseas student or labor worker, our embassy will do it. The deputy consul slapped the table. Fill out Lawyer Gu's information. I'll contact the country right away and see what they're doing. Chapter 650. There was actually a limit to what the people in the embassy could do. Most of the time, they needed authorization from domestic departments before they could act abroad. It was precisely because of this that they were too inflexible and caused delays that Hua Xiaoheng and the Special Operations Forces were born. The two American lawyers nodded and sat in the small conference room to carefully fill in Gu Nianji's resume. They weren't familiar with Gu Nianji, but she was an employee of their law firm, so the HR department had detailed information about her. The two American lawyers immediately contacted the American law firm. It was around 2 p.m. in the United States. The two lawyers called back to the American law firm. After some effort, they finally contacted the HR director and told him about Gu Nianji. When the HR director learned that Gu Nianji might have gone missing in Germany, he took it seriously and immediately sent Gu Nianji's resume to the two lawyers. At the same time, he texted a number He Jichu had specially left for the law firm's executives. Only the executives knew this number. The employees didn't know. He Jichu had told them that if he returned to his hometown and the law firm was in a difficult situation and needed to be resolved quickly, they could text this number. Otherwise, they shouldn't contact this number. In all these years, they hadn't used this number to contact He Jichu. This was the first time. To appease the two American lawyers, the HR director said to them, I've already sent the message to Lawyer He. He will contact you when he knows. The HR director of the law firm knew that Gu Nianji had been single-handedly recruited by He Jichu, so he chose to personally train her after she was recruited. According to the rules, Gu Nianji was a rookie lawyer. It was impossible for her to be taught by a lawyer and partner like He Jichu. But what were the rules? Rules were meant to be broken. He Jichu had personally instructed them to take care of Gu Nianji, so the HR department knew what was good for them and insisted on following the rules. The law was not unreasonable. Those who could reach the top were all shrewd people. The two American lawyers at the Wuxia embassy in Munich heard that He Jichu had already sent the message. They immediately said, we also tried to contact Lawyer He, but we couldn't get through to his phone. It kept going to voicemail. Really? I'm not sure about that, but I've already texted him. Let's see if he'll call you back. The HR director pretended that he had tried his best and didn't mention that the number wasn't known to his subordinates. The two lawyers saw that the law firm had tried their best and didn't ask for more. They finished filling out Gu Nianji's resume at the embassy and left. This resume was, of course, the identity that Gu Nianji could use in the Wuxia Empire, including the fact that her father, Gu Xiangguan, had appeared later. This was also on the American law firm's data sheet. When the deputy consul of the Wuxia Imperial Embassy in Munich saw the information sheet, he didn't realize who Gu Nianji was. This was because the deputy consul had never known Gu Nianji before. He had never had any contact with Hua Xiaoheng's rank or department. Gu Nianji's situation had changed as well. Because her identity had already been verified, someone used it as a reason to lower her security level. She was now no different from a normal Wuxia citizen and no longer enjoyed the highest security level that Hua Xiaoheng had given her before. Because of these two reasons, the deputy consul didn't realize the severity of the situation when he checked Gu Nianji's information at the embassy. He sent the news of Gu Nianji's disappearance back to the Wuxia Ministry of Foreign Affairs to wait for a domestic review to determine the scope of action they could take. However, the two lawyers didn't know about these procedures. After returning to the Hilton Hotel from the embassy, they chatted and had a good impression of the Wuxia embassy staff in Munich. They were happy that things had gone smoothly. They had just returned to their room to tidy up when they saw Smith and another colleague return with dark expressions. Well, looking at the two men's downcast faces, the two knew that their trip was not going to be smooth sailing. What's going on? Don't tell me you only went to report a case, but the other party refused to file it. One of the lawyers said exaggeratedly. He had only wanted to make fun of them, but Smith rolled his eyes and snapped, "These pigs. They have the guts to refuse to file it." Everyone was speechless. Did I really get it right? Why? The lawyer who had made fun of them was confused. How can they refuse to file something like this? Let me tell you, the Munich Regional Police Department has a lot of drama. They first said we aren't Lawyer Gu's immediate family, so we can't file a case for her. Smith retorted and said Lawyer Gu is an adult and doesn't need immediate family to file a case. They immediately said we have too little evidence and won't even file it for us. They insist Lawyer Gu was just having fun and forgot to contact us. They won't admit she's missing. The other lawyer who went to the police station with Smith shook his head and sighed. What should we do? They're such bastards. I bet Lawyer Gu didn't forget to contact us because she was having fun. Do you have any common sense? The other two lawyers who had just returned from the Wuxia embassy in Munich were also furious. This is too much. We need their embassy to step in at this time. Right, you went to the embassy of Lawyer Gu's country. How was it? What do they plan to do? Smith poured himself a glass of red wine and swirled it in his hand before downing it. Oh, their embassy is great. The deputy consul came to see us personally and had us fill out Lawyer Gu's information form. It seems he wants to consult his superiors. One of the lawyers who went to the Wuxia embassy in Munich began to report on their situation. It was obviously much better than Smith's. Really? Smith finally felt better. If they can personally come forward to file a case, I'd like to see if these sly police would dare to refuse to file a case. He slammed the glass of red wine down on the bar in the room. Another lawyer also said, at that time, we even directly called the director of the Human Resources Department of the American law firm. He happened to be in the office, so he sent Lawyer Gu's information to us. He also said that he had already sent a text message to Lawyer He to let him know about this. Gu Nianji was He Jichu's personal lawyer, so if something happened to her, He Jichu would definitely be notified. He texted Lawyer He? Did it work? Does the director know we can't get through to Lawyer He's phone? Smith asked suspiciously. The four of us have each called countless times, but there's still no reply. He slammed his hand on the table and was in the midst of righteous anger when he suddenly heard his phone ring. He took it out impatiently and froze. It's Lawyer He. Smith raised the phone and trembled as he shouted excitedly. They were almost in despair after not being able to contact He Jichu for so many days. The other three people in the room were also excited. They didn't speak and focused on Smith. Smith simply put it on speaker. He Jichu's voice came from the phone's microphone. It was the usual American English with an R sound. What's going on? The director of human resources didn't make it clear. What happened to Nianji? Smith took a deep breath and said solemnly into the phone, Lawyer Gu has been missing for 10 days. The other side of the phone didn't speak for a long time. He didn't know if He Jichu didn't understand or was shocked, but it was silent for a long time until Smith thought he had hung up. He Jichu said simply, I'll be right back. Then he hung up. Smith and the three lawyers in the room looked at each other for a while and seemed to sigh in relief. Okay, Lawyer He will be back soon. Once he was back, they would have a pillar of support. In He Jichu's room, he sat in front of the window with one hand supporting his head and the other resting on the sofa armrest. He watched the scenery outside without moving. It was evening, and the setting sun was like a round salted egg yolk against the western sky, emitting its last bit of heat. There was a huge ginkgo tree outside the window. When the evening wind blew, countless yellow and green leaves fell like fans. A woman in plain silk pants carried a small basket and bent over to pick up the fallen leaves under the ginkgo tree. As if sensing someone looking in her direction, the woman looked up and smiled at He Jichu's window. It was Wen Shui. He Jichu didn't look at her. His gaze was in the direction of the ginkgo tree, but his mind was actually empty. He was thinking about Gu Nianji. How could it be so coincidental? He had just left and Nianji had gotten into trouble. It was like this last time and the time before that, this kind of thing happened again and again. He Jichu couldn't help but think that there were still people around him who were holding him back. He thought he had gotten rid of those people a long time ago, but now it seemed that he hadn't. The biggest culprit was still lurking around him. No matter who this person was or what their identity was, once he found them, they would be tortured until they wished they were dead. This was also why He Jichu didn't want to bring Gu Nianji back for now. He couldn't be sure that he was completely safe with her. He had originally thought that Gu Nianji would be absolutely safe with Hua Xiaoheng, so he would rather let her stay with him, even if it hurt him to death. Now it seemed that wasn't the case. He Jichu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He rubbed his temples to calm his anger. After a while he picked up the phone and ordered his people, get ready immediately. I'm going to Germany. 10 minutes later, Hijichu went to Senior Mr. He's room to say goodbye. He made some arrangements and only left after obtaining Senior Mr. He's approval. By the time when Shui received the news and rushed over, Hijichu had already left. Auntie Chin, has the eldest young master already left? When Shui asked worriedly. The old master just finished his craniotomy, and he dares to leave by himself? Auntie Chin sat in her room and patiently arranged flowers. She picked out fresh flowers from the greenhouse from the basket and said dryly, the old master's surgery was very successful. He doesn't have to worry about the future anymore. Also, Auntie Chin didn't say anything else. She smiled, and it was as if a bolt of lightning had lit up the dimly lit room. It was dazzling and blinding. She slowly turned around to look at Wen Shui. "I.e., come and help Auntie Chin finish arranging the flowers." Wen Shui slowly walked over and knelt beside Auntie Chin. She patiently helped her arrange the remaining flowers and grass one by one. Auntie Chin's hand touched her shoulder. Her hand was so white and smooth that it looked like it was carved from suet jade. It was even colder than real suet jade. "I is the best. I didn't have to say anything and you could arrange the flowers exactly the way I wanted. I was taught by Auntie Chin. How could I not understand your intentions?" When Shui smiled good-naturedly and didn't dare look at Auntie Chin's face. She was truly too beautiful. Every time she looked at her she would fall into a daze. But Senior Mr. He, sigh, how could he be so blind? Ever since Senior Mr. He's first wife passed away, he didn't even care about a stunning woman like Auntie Chin. However, this kind of infatuation had an irresistible attraction to women. It was the same for Auntie Chin, right? When Shui silently held up the flowers and said, "Should we put these flowers in Senior Mr. He's room?" "No." Auntie Chin sighed. "We can't go in before Senior Mr. He gets up." "What?" When Shui cried out. "How can we do that? Auntie Chin, you and Senior Mr. He are husband and wife." Although she was the second wife, she was still his legitimate wife. Auntie Chin shook her head indifferently. How could those people dare to disobey the young master's orders? But it doesn't matter. As long as Senior Mr. He gets better, I'll do anything. As she spoke, she placed her suet jade hand on her abdomen. There was a new life growing there. When Shui sighed and praised, "Auntie Chin, people are made of flesh. Senior Mr. He will definitely understand your heart in time." "I hope so." Auntie Chin tilted her head and looked out the window. Her large eyes sparkled like stars and her entire body lit up. At 7 a.m. the next day, a private plane from Boston landed at Germany's Munich International Airport. Hijichu got off the plane expressionlessly and was surrounded by people as he exited through the airport's special VIP passageway. After exiting the airport customs, a custom-made Rolls-Royce Phantom bulletproof limousine was already parked at the airport entrance, waiting for Hijichu to get in. The Munich police were notified ahead of time and even provided 2 police cars. The police cars cleared the way and escorted Hijichu to the Hilton Hotel without any obstructions. The pedestrians and cars on the road all moved out of the way, and everyone looked curiously at the Rolls-Royce Phantom surrounded by police cars. Which country's leader was sitting inside? I wonder if any foreign leaders have visited Munich recently? Maybe it's a private visit, someone muttered. That won't be reported on the news, but the reception won't change. Oh, that's possible. As everyone chatted, someone took a photo of Hijichu's Rolls-Royce Phantom and posted it on social media to let everyone guess which country's leader had come to Munich in private. However, the photo was immediately deleted as soon as it was posted, and the IP address of the person who uploaded the photo was blocked. His phone immediately received a warning call from the police, saying that taking a photo of someone else without the owner's permission and posting it on social media was a violation of someone's privacy. He would be subject to punitive compensation. Not to mention anything else, just punitive compensation was more frightening than going to jail. As long as it wasn't a life sentence, one would eventually be released from jail. However, punitive compensation would cause one to be stuck in poverty for the rest of their lives, and they would never be able to lift their heads again. For people like that, a fine was more painful than going to jail. This way, no one dared to post a photo of Hijichu's Rolls-Royce Phantom again. Hijichu returned to the Hilton Hotel as fast as he could. Smith and the others received a call early in the morning saying that Hijichu would be arriving at the hotel soon. They immediately dressed up and waited at the Hilton Hotel for Hijichu's arrival. When the Rolls-Royce Phantom surrounded by police cars appeared, Smith and the others never expected it to be Hijichu's personal car. So when Hijichu got out of the car and walked to the Hilton Hotel lobby with a group of bodyguards and subordinates, Smith and the others were stunned. They froze for a while before hurrying to catch up and call out, "Lawyer he." Hijichu stopped and turned around to see Smith and the others rushing over. He nodded and gently waved his right hand, and the bodyguards beside him immediately made way for them. Smith and the others walked over and were shocked speechless by Hijichu's extravagance. He stood among the sturdy bodyguards and subordinates with his usual aloof expression. His shimmering peach blossom eyes were devoid of any emotion, and although he wasn't as sturdy as the bodyguards, his aura was invincible. He was like a king who ruled over the world. Smith couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was a completely different state of mind from treating Hijichu as his boss. "Lawyer. Lawyer he." Smith greeted Hijichu with trepidation, his eyes constantly glancing at the bodyguards and subordinates beside Hijichu. It seemed like only 10 days had passed, and the quiet but refined and modest Hijichu was gone. The current Hijichu was both unfamiliar and familiar to those who had known him before. Hijichu knew what Smith and the others were thinking from their expressions, but he wasn't in the mood or time to explain it to them. "Come with me," Hijichu said dryly, then turned to walk into the hotel lobby and into the elevator. Smith and the others hurried to follow and found a place in the elevator that was crowded with bodyguards. Chapter 651. The elevator quickly ascended and soon arrived at the floor where Hijichu and the others lived. "Come in and talk." Hijichu used the key card to open his door and turned to let Smith and the others in. His 4 American legal assistants filed in, and Hijichu was the last to enter. He closed the door and his bodyguards and followers waited outside. Once they entered Hijichu's room, Smith and the other 3 finally let out a sigh of relief. "Lawyer. Lawyer he outside, those people outside." Smith stammered out the biggest question on his mind. They had originally thought Hijichu was a rich kid at most, but now it seemed like his background wasn't ordinary at all. It seemed like Lawyer he had kept a low profile when he brought them to Munich. Hijichu didn't want to talk too much about his family, so he simply said, "A friend of mine made this for me because I was in a hurry to get back." "Oh, so it was because of Gunyenji again." Everyone understood immediately. "What's going on?" Hijichu sat down on the armchair and gestured for Smith and the other 3 to sit down. The 4 lawyers sat in their usual seats and Smith began to talk about Gunyenji. "The day after you left, Lawyer Gu said she was going to meet a friend and texted the 4 of us to say she would be back in 10 days. Smith said as he swiped open the phone with Gunyenji's text message for Hijichu to see. "This is the text message I received from Lawyer Gu on my phone." All 3 of them received the same text message from Lawyer Gu's phone. The other 3 lawyers also took out their phones for Hijichu to see. Hijichu only glanced at it before replying expressionlessly, "Who would have nothing better to do than send the same text to everyone? Are you close to Nyenji?" With just one sentence, Smith and the others understood what was going on and immediately felt extremely ashamed. They truly hadn't thought about it from that perspective. At the time, they only thought Gunyenji wanted to give them an explanation, so she sent a group text to everyone. But that didn't make sense. Logically speaking, even if she planned to take 10 days off, she would at most inform her boss and a colleague she was close with. Some people wouldn't even tell their colleagues and would only ask for leave from their boss. People who would greet their colleagues usually did so when they had work to do for them. Gunyenji obviously didn't have any work for Smith and the others to do. Hijichu wasn't there at the time and Gunyenji was the closest to Smith, so it wasn't strange for Smith to receive the text. However, it was strange for the other 3 people who weren't close to her to receive the same text. If the 4 of them had been slightly more vigilant and immediately called Gunyenji to ask what was going on, perhaps things wouldn't have gotten to this point. Hijichu took Smith's phone and tapped on it a few times to check its settings before tossing the phone back to Smith. "Someone installed a Trojan horse blocking program on your phone. I'm guessing that Nyenji might have called you, but she was intercepted and transferred away." "What? Trojan horse? No way. I've never been on a phishing website." Smith howled. "Lawyer you have to believe me. I really didn't." The other 3 looked at each other and showed their phones to Hijichu in unison. "Lawyer can you take a look at this for us?" Hijichu took them and checked them one by one before tossing them back to them. "Your phones are the same. It's the same Trojan virus." The 4 lawyers' faces instantly turned ashen. Modern people's phones were like their own personal secrets. There were more or less things they didn't want others to see on them. Now that they knew there was a Trojan virus on their phones, they felt like they had been naked in broad daylight. It was so shameful that they didn't want to show their faces. Hijichu originally wanted to persuade them to change phones, but then he thought about how Gunyenji wouldn't know their numbers if they changed phones now. What if she found a chance to call for help? Wouldn't that mean they couldn't find the number? Hijichu immediately changed his mind. He first extended his hand to Smith. Give me your phone. I'll remove the Trojan virus for you and install an app that can block it. That way, if anyone is blind enough to do something to your phone again, you'll know immediately. Hijichu would also know immediately because he had secretly added his own phone to the Trojan virus blocking app on their phones as a copy of the information transmission. Hijichu also had this app on his phone. He had used it to discover that Zhao Yangzi from the Wuxia Empire had attempted to do something to his phone. Smith was overjoyed and nodded quickly. Thank you, Lawyer He. Thank you, Lawyer He. With such a great app, Mama would never have to worry about someone installing a Trojan virus on his phone again. Hijichu did the same thing and removed the Trojan virus blocking app from the other 3 lawyers' phones. He also installed an app that could block the Trojan virus. While installing the app, Hijichu was excited and analyzed the text messages Gunyenji had sent to Smith. He actually discovered that the text messages weren't sent from Gunyenji's phone number. Gunyenji's phone number displayed on Smith's phone was a disguise. Just like how many virus emails could use a fake email address to disguise themselves, the person sending the text messages also used a fake phone number to hide their real number. It was just that using a fake email address for a virus email was relatively easy. People only needed to be a bit more careful to see the clues. However, it was much more difficult to disguise a fake number in a text message. It was even harder to investigate. Smith and the others looked at Hijichu with admiration. They all looked like they wanted to worship him. Their eyes were shining with admiration. Gunyenji's family background was better, he was younger, he was smarter, more hardworking, and more knowledgeable. It was no wonder that someone like that became a partner at their law firm before the age of 30. They originally thought that Hijichu relied on his family background to become a partner at the largest law firm in the United States in his 20s. Now they understood that even without his family background, Hijichu's ability was more than enough to become a partner. Hijichu felt uncomfortable being stared at by the 4 people. He frowned and pointed at Smith. Continue. What happened after that? Smith came back to his senses and quickly said, but we waited for 10 days and found that we still couldn't contact Lawyer Gu. We went to the hotel surveillance footage and found that Lawyer Gu left the hotel in the morning 10 days ago in a private car we chartered. The private car driver told us that Lawyer Gu personally told him that she would only be staying at the Konigsee for 1 day. She said that she would call him that night and ask him to pick her up. As Smith spoke, he showed Hijichu the video of the interview he had recorded with the private car driver. Hijichu sat up straight and stared at the video for a while. He murmured, Nyenji really went to the Konigsee? Yes, we checked the hotel's security footage for the past 10 days. Lawyer Gu left the hotel in the morning 10 days ago and got into the private car. We haven't heard from her since. Smith also showed Hijichu the surveillance footage they had requested from the Hilton Hotel. Of course, they only showed Hijichu the surveillance footage related to Gunyenji. There were so many other videos that Hijichu didn't have time to watch them all. Hijichu frowned as he saw Gunyenji wearing sportswear on the video and carrying her favorite Hermes bucket bag. She walked briskly out of the Hilton Hotel lobby, walked down the stairs and got into the private car. Smith pressed pause and the video stopped at the moment Gunyenji got into the car. Hijichu stared at the image for a long time, his face a bit pale. Smith and the other 3 looked at each other and said one last thing to Hijichu. Also, the day after Lawyer Gu disappeared, Seth escaped from the hospital and hasn't been caught yet. What? Hijichu stood up abruptly. Say that again. What does this have to do with Seth? He clenched his fists and his shimmering, sultry eyes narrowed dangerously. He was no longer carefree and instead had a suppressed ruthlessness. Smith was a bit scared and shifted back on the sofa. There's currently no evidence to prove the connection between the two. I'm just telling you the truth. Hijichu couldn't stay calm anymore. He crossed his arms and paced around the living room as he said to Smith, tell me everything in chronological order again. Start from when you and Nyenji went to the hospital to see Seth. Was that B*TCH really injured? Smith nodded and patiently recounted everything from the beginning. He even said, since the day after Seth escaped from the hospital, I've been urging the Munich police department to put him on the wanted list every day. In the end, the police gave us all kinds of excuses and we still haven't heard from Seth. They didn't say it, but everyone knew that Seth must have escaped after so many days without any news. He might have even gone into hiding overseas. Also, this Munich police department is evil to the core. We went to report Lawyer Gu's disappearance yesterday and asked them to investigate, but they actually refused to open a case. Smith was filled with righteous indignation. Thinking about how the Munich police department had made things difficult for him yesterday, he wanted nothing more than to sue them for another billion. When Hijichu heard that, his brows no longer furrowed. He actually chuckled, and his laughter carried a chilling sense of ruthlessness. His expression gradually calmed down as he thought to himself, I wanted to discuss the law with you, but you actually want to use your background against me. I wanted to treat this case fairly, but you actually used underhanded methods against my people. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no other way. Okay, I got it. You guys can leave first. Hijichu made up his mind. He waved his hand and said to the 4 lawyers, you guys go and investigate the driver of the charter bus first. See if he's been acting strangely this past month. See if he's been in contact with our enemies. Especially see if there were any strange changes in his bank account. Oh, you're saying there's something wrong with this driver? Smith and the others were stunned. No. Would the driver hired by their law firm be the kind of person who would break the law? Wasn't there supposed to be a background check? He was the last person to see Nianji, so you can't ignore him no matter what, Hijichu said coldly. Get out. Smith and the others looked at each other and left in shame. Coming out of Hijichu's room, Smith punched the wall hard and said angrily, don't let me find out there's something wrong with this driver. Or else I'll make sure he goes to jail for the rest of his life. The other 3 lawyers were also very uneasy. In the 10 days that Gu Nianji had been missing, they'd ridden in this driver's car many times and never thought that he was someone with ulterior motives. Hijichu stood alone in the hotel room with his arms crossed and a gloomy expression on his face as he stared at the French windows. The weather was gloomy and there was no sun. It was already late September and the weather was starting to turn cold. At this time Nianji, how was she? Hijichu couldn't think about it. The moment he thought about it, he felt like someone had taken a knife and carved out his heart, cruelly chopping it up and throwing it in front of him over and over again. His flesh was a bloody mess and the pain was excruciating. In this world, the person he wanted to protect the most was Nianji. But what exactly had gone wrong that caused him to miss her time and time again? If something really happened to her this time, Hijichu no longer planned on living alone. He hadn't been able to protect her when she was alive. Then he could only chase her down to the underworld and use his own life to repay her. When that time came, no one would be able to separate them. Smith and the other 3 lawyers returned to their rooms and, after a simple assignment, began investigating all of the driver's whereabouts for the past month. They found the best detective agency in Munich and offered a high price they couldn't refuse. There were no other conditions other than to quickly and completely investigate a month's worth of information on the driver within 2 days. When Smith and the others heavily investigated the driver of the business car, Hijichu also used his own private help to intervene in the case. Not long after Smith and the others left his room, Hijichu called Secretary General Philip, the Supreme Commander of NATO in Europe. NATO appeared to be a military alliance led by the United States, but in reality, it was the Emperor of the European countries. The Supreme Commander of NATO's status and connections in Europe were unimaginable to the average person. Secretary General Philip was extremely excited when he received Hijichu's call. He had long heard of Mr. He, who had deep cooperation with the U.S. military, but never had the opportunity to get to know him. Now that Hijichu took the initiative to extend an olive branch, of course Secretary General Philip was more than happy to accept. No problem. It's just a few phone calls and I'll contact them for you right away. Secretary General Philip wanted nothing more than to nod and bow to Hijichu to express his respect. Hijichu agreed and said, I want to see them at the entrance of the Munich Police Department at 10 in the morning. It's only 9 now, so there's still an hour. Even if the person you're looking for is in Berlin, I can send a private plane to pick them up immediately. Secretary General Philip patted his chest and guaranteed. Thank you. I'll see you in the United States when I get back. Hijichu promised Philip a meeting in the United States, which was exactly what Philip needed. He was overjoyed and stood up immediately. Mr. He, you're too kind. It's just a few phone calls. But I heard that everyone yearns for Mr. He's banquet, so I hope I'll have the luck and opportunity. Hijichu laughed lightly. At the end of next month I'll be holding a birthday banquet at the manor, and I hope Mr. Philip will come. The invitation will be sent to your place in a few days. Oh? It's your birthday, Mr. He? Philip was ecstatic. To be invited to a birthday banquet meant that he was a very close friend. No, it's my good friend's birthday. It was Gu Nianji's birthday. If she could come back safely this time, he would accept her back to his side again. He would no longer tolerate her, and he would no longer ignore her. I understand. Philip instinctively knew that this good friend had to be his girlfriend. He was overjoyed and kept saying thank you, even though Hijichu had already hung up. The smile on Philip's face didn't disappear as he immediately called the people Hijichu had requested. He happened to be familiar with these people. Although they weren't from the military, they were all powerful political figures in Germany. Of course, he had to have a good relationship with the Emperor of Europe. Hijichu asked him to help make a few calls to the mayor of Munich, the Minister of Justice, and the chairman of the Munich Regional Council. He asked them to go with him to the Munich Police Department that day. An hour passed and it was 10 o'clock in the morning. When Hijichu arrived at the Munich Regional Police Department with his bodyguards and followers, the mayor of Munich, the Minister of Justice, and the chairman of the Munich Regional Council were already waiting for him outside. Mr. He, I've heard a lot about you. The Minister of Justice of Germany had been sitting in on Li Haiqing's case for a while, so he immediately came over when he received a call from the NATO Supreme Commander, Secretary General Philip. Hijichu didn't like to show his face in public, but that didn't mean he didn't have connections. His status in the United States was enough for all the German officials to treat him kindly. Hijichu smiled reservedly and casually shook hands with the Minister of Justice before parting ways. The mayor of Munich and the chairman of the regional council came to Hijichu's side respectfully and shook hands with him. Then they asked with concern, Mr. He, what brings you to the Munich Regional Police Department? These people already knew that Hijichu represented an American law firm in Germany for a lawsuit a month ago, but they didn't know Hijichu's other identity in the United States. This time, it was Hijichu who took the initiative to use his connections in the United States to allow the NATO Supreme Commander, Secretary General Philip, to reveal his other identity in the United States to these important German politicians. Chapter 652. Even the Supreme Commander of NATO had to lick his boots, so of course the German officials and lawmakers couldn't ignore him. 09 Xiao we always knew you were representing that female student from the Wuxia Empire in the lawsuit, but we didn't expect you to have such status in the United States. We were negligent, very negligent. The mayor of Munich almost bowed 90 degrees. Hijichu nodded lightly with a half smile. I did come to the lawsuit and never thought about asking Mr. Philip for help. But your Munich police department is too powerful. My right-hand man who helped me with Li Haiqing's case couldn't be found for a while. My subordinates came to the police department to file a case to find her, but your police department refused to file a case and even talked to me about being underage. If Hijichu really had the ability to get NATO to help, then it meant military control. This was more than just ruthless. Your right-hand man can't be found? Where did he go missing? The mayor of Munich stuttered when he heard that, and sweat beaded on his forehead. The local officials knew exactly what kind of lawsuit Hijichu and his men were fighting. But how could they have known Hijichu had such a background and status? Of course, everyone tacitly stood on York and Seth's side. After all, they were citizens of their own country, so they couldn't help outsiders. Also, York knew how to conduct himself and was very resourceful. The high-ranking officials all more or less benefited from York, so they turned a blind eye to the stalemate over Li Haiqing's case. The Germans had always looked down on the eastern countries, especially the Wuxia Empire, which had been so backward and incompetent in the past. In their minds, the Wuxia Empire was still the weak eastern country that was isolated internationally and beaten up by other countries. They didn't expect this weak country to surpass them all these years, and their national power shot up like a rocket. Within 20 years, they went from a third-rate country to China and became the second most powerful country in the world. They were second only to the United States and had long left established European countries like Germany in the dust. However, because their national power rose too quickly, they hadn't accumulated enough prestige and influence internationally, so they were often ignored and looked down upon. It could be said that if the victim in Li Haiqing's case was an American, the German police and court wouldn't have dared to tamper with the case so blatantly. Hijichu knew these people very well. He looked straight ahead as he walked towards the police station. We'll talk about the specifics later. But I'm not here today for this matter. I'm here for something else. The mayor of Munich, the German Minister of Justice, and the chairman of the Munich Regional Council all felt their faces burn. Hijichu's words hurt. The three of them grumbled inwardly about York's overreach. It was one thing for him to be able to do whatever he wanted in the Roslau area, but now he even had a finger in the Munich police department. Hijichu wasn't the only one who was unhappy. Even the mayor of Munich felt a little uncomfortable. When the four of them walked to the entrance of the Munich Regional Police Department, the chief of the Munich Regional Police Department received the news and finally rushed over. He walked out of the door and extended his hand to the mayor of BR from afar. "Welcome, Mr. Mayor. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you." The mayor of Munich shook hands with the Munich Regional Police Chief with a straight face and introduced He Jichu to him. "This is Mr. He, a close friend of NATO's Supreme Commander Philip. He has some matters to discuss with your police station." 09 Small Say Net. The Munich Regional Police Chief was no stranger to He Jichu and could guess why he was here. He just didn't expect He Jichu to be able to find the Supreme Commander of NATO, the Mayor of Munich, the German Minister of Justice, and the Chairman of the Munich Regional Council to support him. Mr. He, what can I do for you?" The Munich Regional Police Chief was almost bowing to the ground. His bald head was shiny, but it wasn't clear if it was from sweat or oil. "I don't dare to give you advice. Yesterday my subordinates came to report that my right-hand man went missing in your place, but you refused to file a case. I want to know why." He Jichu folded his hands behind his back and stared sharply at the Munich Regional Police Chief. "Don't you think you should give us an explanation?" The Munich Regional Police Chief immediately knew what he was talking about. He Jichu's first two assistants came to report that their colleague went missing yesterday and requested the police station to file a case for her, but they refused. Is it about your assistant's disappearance?" The Munich Regional Police Chief stammered as he tried to think of a way to deal with it. He couldn't refuse, but if he agreed, what would happen to York? The Munich Regional Police Chief cursed York for being brainless. He wasn't even his biological son, so why did he have to do this? For the sake of his good-for-nothing stepson, he was going to drag all of them down with him. Well, actually, it was like this. At the time, they didn't say they wouldn't file a case. They only said there wasn't enough evidence and asked your subordinates to collect more evidence. The Munich Regional Police Chief was sweating profusely and kept wiping the sweat off his forehead with a handkerchief. He respectfully invited He Jichu, the mayor of Munich, the German Minister of Justice, and the chairman of the Munich Regional Council into his office to speak. "Mr. He, are you here today to report the disappearance of your right-hand man?" The Munich Regional Police Chief asked respectfully. He stood before He Jichu as if he was shorter than him to begin with. He Jichu walked into the Munich Regional Police Chief's office with two powerful bodyguards who looked like mercenaries. He sat on the sofa, crossed his legs and rested one hand on the armrest. His aura was intimidating as he glanced around the office. He laughed coldly and shook his head. "Of course not. This matter doesn't matter anymore. My assistant is already back. They were impatient and made things difficult for you." He wouldn't let everyone know about Nyenji's disappearance. Also, Seth was related to her disappearance, so He Jichu didn't want anyone to connect the two incidents. Public opinion could melt metal, and slander could wear away at one's bones. If someone with ulterior motives started rumors online, he didn't even need to think to know how bad it would be. So he didn't mention anything about Nyenji's disappearance at all. He put his hand on his other hand and continued, "I came today for another matter. I lost something important and was worried it would be smuggled out of Germany, so I came to report it." He also said, "I don't need you to search for my lost item. After all, I was careless. Although I went missing in your territory, there's nothing we can do about it if you're complying with us on the surface but slacking on the inside. Therefore, I'll personally fund and hire people to search for it. However, I need your authorization to allow me to use the necessary means within Germany." 09 Small Say Net. This method of course included but was not limited to the use of force. To be honest, He Jichu didn't believe the Munich police would sincerely send people to search for Gu Nianji. Even if they could take the initiative to look for her, He Jichu didn't want everyone to know about it. He Jichu couldn't put Gu Nianji's photo in the German missing persons file, nor would he allow Gu Nianji's photo to be sent to everyone's phone as a missing victim. The Munich Regional Police Chief was the first to applaud He Jichu's words. He truly didn't want to help search for Gu Nianji. Even an idiot would know that the disappearance of the female lawyer had something to do with York and his son. At this time, the police chief only wanted to be on his own and didn't want to get involved in the case again. He Jichu personally said that his assistant had returned, but he lost something important to find. Naturally, the police chief was happy to pretend he didn't know anything and didn't expose him. "I agree. I completely agree. I can immediately help Mr. He apply to the court for permission so you can look for your lost treasure in Germany." The Munich Regional Police Chief rubbed his hands and wanted nothing more than to send He Jichu to the court immediately. He Jichu nodded with satisfaction and glanced at the Munich mayor. "What do you think?" The Munich mayor originally wanted his police to personally help find Hijichu's capable assistant, so it would leave a deep impression on Hijichu. But his police chief had already started to shift the blame, so he had no choice but to follow. He laughed. Sure. No problem. But this legal process still needs to go through. Your people must at least have the qualifications of a detective agency. The German Minister of Justice immediately shook his head and helped Hijichu find legal basis. They don't have to have the qualifications of a detective agency. As long as the court allows it and there are social figures vouching for it, Americans, especially the U.S. military, can take necessary actions in Germany. As expected of the Minister of Justice, he really knew how to play around with legal provisions. Hijichu's calm and gloomy face finally showed a hint of a smile. He spread his hands. Thank you, Mr. Minister. My people are indeed Americans, so they should meet the requirements of your country's laws. The Munich Regional Council chief waited for a long time for an opportunity to curry favor and immediately said, "That's great. Why don't I help you apply to the court for permission? This is a case that happened in Munich, so as the representative of the citizens of the Munich region, I have the responsibility to protect the personal and property safety of the people in my jurisdiction, including but not limited to German citizens, as well as legal immigrants, tourists, and workers on official business trips." Hijichu's lost item was, of course, his property safety being compromised, so it was also within the scope of the law. The three people who came with Hijichu today were almost all the top leaders in the Munich region. With their help, Hijichu's permit application went smoothly. At noon, he had already received the court permit to take necessary actions in Germany. With this permit, he could use the excuse of looking for important property to secretly search for Gunyenji. He had decided to do this a long time ago, so he directly brought close to 50 of his personal subordinates from the United States. Other than 4 of them who were his bodyguards, the rest were brought by him specifically to search for Gunyenji. These people were all detectives in the United States, and many of them were directly retired U.S. soldiers. They were all experts in tracking and investigation in the military. When they began their search in Munich, none of the Munich media reported Gunyenji's disappearance. Even Smith and the others understood Hijichu's intentions and kept quiet about it. They all said Gunyenji had already returned from her trip and couldn't be reached before because her phone had been stolen. She had changed her number and was having fun with her friends, so she forgot to inform them. Even the Wuxia Imperial Embassy in Munich received Hijichu's notification that Gunyenji had already returned, so they didn't need to search for her anymore. Of course, the embassy didn't want any trouble, so they quickly reported it back to the Wuxia Empire to say everything was fine and that Gunyenji had already returned. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Wuxia Empire had their own procedures, so when they received the second internal report from the Munich embassy's deputy consul saying Gunyenji was fine, the first report about her disappearance had already been reported. However, it was suppressed in a department within the Ministry of Internal Affairs, so no one reported it. Therefore, the Wuxia Empire didn't know about it yet. After suppressing the news of Gunyenji's disappearance, Hijichu began to focus on searching for her. Lawyer Gu was last seen at the Konig Sea, a 2-hour drive from Munich. Hijichu sent them the coordinates of the Konig Sea. "This is your permit. You can use force if necessary." Actually, this permit was similar to a gun permit, except that the gun permit was for Wuxia citizens, while the general permit was for foreigners. Hijichu's designated search team consisted of 41 people. They were divided into 4 groups of 10, and each group had a team leader. The remaining person was the team leader and was in charge of the 4 groups. "What do you plan to do?" Hijichu only asked the team leader. The team leader was a retired soldier in his 30s. He used to be a Special Forces soldier in the U.S. Navy SEALs and majored in reconnaissance and sniping. The team leader took out his tablet and brought up the topography and situation near the Konig Sea. He pointed to the surroundings and said, "Lawyer Gu has been missing for 10 days. It rained a few times in those 10 days, so it's hard to say if we search now. Normally, the first 36 hours of a person's disappearance would be a long time gone by. If they wanted to find someone, they had to find another way." Hijichu nodded. "Interesting. Go on." The team leader continued, "Look here. The Konig Sea is a famous scenic spot near Munich. There are many tourists every day. I think we should work with the Munich government's tourism department and say that in order to promote the Konig Sea's tourism resources, we can start a video competition in Germany. The theme will be the original video of the Konig Sea's trip over the past month. It has to have scenery, people, specific time and location, and no signs of editing. It has to be natural, and then we can let experts choose the first, second and third prizes. We can set the prize money higher so there will be more people participating and a greater social impact. Ijichu understood. With this method, they could discreetly filter out the video of the day Gunyenji disappeared and find out if she had appeared. Based on the situation they were facing, this was the best way. Yes, I agree. Ijichu turned around and ordered his personal assistant. Go contact the Munich tourism department. Don't use our name. Find a random American company and work with the tourism department under their name. The prize money can be set as one first prize of 100,000 euros, 10 second prizes of 50,000 euros, and 100 third prizes of 10,000 euros. The deadline must be tight and the registration will end in 5 days. He set up so many prizes to attract more people to participate and make people feel that even if they couldn't get first prize, they could at least try for third prize. For many Germans, 10,000 euros was still a large sum of money. Also, it didn't take much time and effort to get this money. They only needed to find the video of the Königssee that they had taken in the past month. Hijichu's personal assistant wrote down all of his requirements and immediately found a suitable American company to use as a cover. Then he contacted the tourism department of the Munich black market. By the afternoon, the news of the competition had been broadcasted to all of Germany's media like never before. It had a wide coverage. Countless Germans saw the advertisement and felt they had a chance to win. They all searched their phones for their records from the past month. There were many German tourists who went to the Königssee in the past month, and most of them were from Munich. By 10 p.m., the competition website Hijichu set up had already received countless uploaded videos. When these videos were uploaded, the uploader was required to specify the date and time the video was taken, from start to finish and accurate down to the second. Therefore, it was very easy for Hijichu and his team to find the time period they wanted from these videos. That night, the staff responsible for watching the videos didn't sleep at all. In the wee hours of the morning, a staff member whose eyes were almost swollen suddenly saw the silhouette of a girl in purple sportswear standing under a big tree next to the Königssee. He immediately jumped up and shouted, "Found it! Found it!" Hijichu, who had been sitting silently behind them, immediately walked over and bent down to look at the screen. "Where?" The staff member pointed at Gunyenji's silhouette on the screen and excitedly said, "Here. Here." Hijichu clicked on the mouse and kept zooming in on the silhouette. Finally, he confirmed it was Gunyenji. The time on the video showed that it was 9:55 in the morning 10 days ago. Hijichu sighed deeply and pressed play. The video continued to play. Suddenly, a man and a woman hugging walked into the staff member's camera and walked behind Gunyenji. Gunyenji seemed to realize someone was walking towards her. She turned around to look and stepped to the side. The man suddenly walked up and raised his arm to pat Gunyenji's back. "Pause," Hijichu immediately said. Hijichu immediately spoke. His eyesight was extraordinary, and he had already discovered some clues. Enlarged the man's hand. The staff member gently clicked the mouse and zoomed in frame by frame. Finally, everyone saw a shiny object in the man's palm. From the shape, it looked like a syringe. He wasn't the kind of man who wished for nothing more than for women to die when they were humiliated. But the humiliation she had suffered, he would personally return it to her. Under Hijichu's orders, the search began in an orderly manner. With the license plate number, it was easy to find the owner. He didn't expect the other party to be so vigilant. "Mr. He, these 2 license plates have long been abandoned. They belong to a British company, but that company was originally a shell company with only one person. 7 years ago, the boss suddenly passed away and declared bankruptcy. There are no clues left." Hijichu sneered when he saw the information they had found. Brilliant. It was truly brilliant. Even he had to admire it. A car with an abandoned license plate can actually drive so well in Germany. Hijichu pointed at the information they had sent. "Continue the search. If you find these 2 cars, I will reward you handsomely." Therefore, at noon that day, Germany's Munich TV station and all social media in Germany were pushing the news that someone was offering a large reward for information about the 2 cars. As long as there was a clue, 1,000 euros would be offered. If the 2 cars were directly found, 100,000 euros would be offered. As soon as the reward was announced, everyone in the Munich area stopped working. Everyone widened their eyes and stared at the cars beside them, wishing they could see flowers blooming from their eyes. As Hijichu made his moves step by step, Smith and the others didn't stay idle. Within 2 days, they had hired the best detective agency in Germany to investigate all the information on the driver of their business car for the past month. including what he had done, who he had met, and even how many times he had slept with his wife and had affairs with his lover. It was all recorded. They even found his bank account. There's really something wrong with this driver. Smith looked at all the information the detective agency had sent and slammed the table in anger. The other 3 lawyers gathered around. What's wrong? You found everything? Look, 15 days ago, his bank account suddenly had 100,000 euros. The money was neither too much nor too little. It was exactly the driver's annual salary for 2 years. It wasn't too much, but it was definitely not little either. This 100,000 euros was transferred from a Swiss bank account. A lawyer who was more proficient in financial crimes looked at the information and said thoughtfully, "This is going to be difficult to investigate." Swiss banks were famous for being tight-lipped. People from all over the world deposited shady money with them, and they relied on this to make money. Who cares which bank it came from? Anyway, this driver accepted such a shady sum of money, so there's something wrong. Also, look at these phone records. 12 days ago, the day before Lawyer Gu's accident, a number called him many times, and he even drove to the Königssee several times before that day. The 4 lawyers discovered these suspicious points and felt that they could apply to the police to arrest the driver. But judging from Lawyer He's intentions, he didn't want everyone to know, so a lot of things were done in private. Even finding people was done by his personal subordinates. So even if the driver was in the wrong, they couldn't really call the police to arrest him. They had a headache. Let's go ask Lawyer He first. Smith picked up the evidence provided by the detective agency and went to Hijichu's room to ring the doorbell. Hijichu's personal assistant opened the door and glanced at them. What's the matter? Mr. He is very busy. Smith cleared his throat. We found some clues and want to report to Lawyer He. Hijichu heard it from inside the room and said directly, "Let them in." The personal assistant quickly moved to the side and watched Smith and the other 3 people enter. Hijichu took them to the small study next door to sit down and asked, "What did you find?" Smith told him about the abnormalities in the driver's bank account and the fact that he had gone to the Königssee the day before. Hijichu secretly clenched his fists and sneered. He betrayed his employer for only 100,000 euros. How short-sighted. Rubbing his temples, Hijichu said to Smith and the others, "Okay, you don't have to worry about this. Leave it to me. I'll leave the matters of the law firm to you guys. I don't have time to worry about it." Yes. Smith and the others quickly nodded and didn't want to cause Hijichu any more trouble. Although they were also very worried about Gunyenji's safety, they knew that they couldn't help much at this point. They could only help Hijichu by not causing him trouble. Smith and the other 3 lawyers walked out of Hijichu's room stiffly and looked at each other without saying anything. How about a drink? Smith suggested. Let's go to my room. I bought some red wine a few days ago and haven't finished it yet. Okay. The other 3 lawyers were also very depressed and needed to drink to drown their sorrows. The 4 of them all knew that Hijichu's next move would most likely not be honorable. It was likely that he would play around the edges of the law. Without a certain level of backing, this kind of play would be very risky. Hijichu telling them to stay away was for their own good. Anyway, they already knew the power Hijichu displayed. It wasn't something they could compare to or imagine. I hope Lawyer Gu can come back safely. Smith raised his glass to the sky outside the window. I hope Seth can be arrested and brought to justice soon. Another lawyer also prayed to the sky. One case hadn't even ended and another had started. Although they were anxious, there was nothing they could do. They could only hope that Hijichu could win with a surprise attack. Just as they expected, Hijichu didn't plan on using legal means to deal with the driver. He didn't have the time. Once he went through legal procedures, he didn't know how long it would take. He couldn't wait and Gunyenji couldn't wait either. Hijichu looked at the information Smith and the others had submitted and immediately ordered the driver to be taken to the Königssee near Munich. It was already evening when they arrived at the Königssee. The sun was about to set, and the surface of the lake shimmered. The weeping willows by the shore were still there and there were few tourists. Most of them had already gone home. Several black Hummer SUVs sped over and stopped by the Königssee. The driver's heart had been pounding ever since he was taken away from his home. When faced with Smith and the other 4's questions, he was able to respond calmly. Even if he said something wrong, he was able to cover it up. But now, faced with the murderous men who looked like mercenaries, looking at their strong muscles and cold demeanor, he found his legs were so weak he couldn't stand up. Hijichu wore a pair of sunglasses of an unknown brand and stood under the willow tree by the Königssee. Half of him was in the light and the other half was in the dark, and his light-colored casual wear made his figure stand out even more. His thin lips were slightly pursed, and the setting sun shone on his face, casting a shadow on his straight and handsome nose. It was just like his entire person, half in the light and half in the dark. "Clear the area." Hijichu waved his hand and gave the order without looking back. Soon, the people he brought with him persuaded the remaining 2 or 3 tourists to leave. "The police are handling a case. Please leave the scene." They took the documents the police gave them and the court's permit to seal off the entire Konichi scenic area. Soon all the tourists left and the sky darkened. Only Hijichu's people and the driver were left near the Konichi. "Tell me what's going on. Who told you to contact me? Who told you to bring Lawyer Gu to this position?" Hijichu's voice was cold and emotionless, but the tone of his voice was more terrifying than a loud roar. Although the driver was much fatter and stronger than Hijichu, he was short, so Hijichu's imposing manner was overshadowed. He trembled and said in a hoarse voice, "No. No one contacted me, no one?" Hijichu turned around. "Make him speak the truth." He stood facing the Konichi. Behind him, a bodyguard walked over with an expressionless face. He grabbed the driver's neck and twisted him to the edge of the Konichi. He kicked the driver's knee and made him kneel down. Then the bodyguard knelt on one knee next to him and suddenly pressed down hard with his arm, pressing the driver's head into the cold lake water. The driver was caught off guard and his face was soaked in the lake water. The water poured in through his nose, choking his windpipe and flowing into his lungs from his windpipe, immediately causing a burning pain. He instinctively struggled and waved his hands in an attempt to break free from the bodyguard's grip, but how could a fat taxi driver like him resist the strength of a special forces soldier? His head was lifted out of the water, and before he could catch his breath, he was pressed back into the water again. After only 2 presses, he broke down and yelled, "I'll talk. I'll talk." Hijichu raised his hand. The bodyguard lifted the driver's head out of the lake water and dragged it to Hijichu. The driver, who was choking to death from the lake water, lay on the ground and coughed for a long time before saying in a trembling voice, "Someone called me and asked me to bring Lawyer Gu to the willow tree on the Konichi to wait for someone. He said he was Lawyer Gu's friend and wanted to give her a little surprise." "Why would he give you 100,000 euros to surprise someone? Do you think we're stupid?" Hijichu folded his hands behind his back and didn't even look at the driver at his feet. "Keep pressing." The driver was shocked. He didn't think Lawyer he would even know someone was giving him money. It looked like these things couldn't be hidden from him. The bodyguard walked over and grabbed the driver's neck to press him into the water again. The driver yelled, "Don't drown me again. I'll talk. This money was given to me by Seth's father, York. He asked me to help him find out what the lawyers would discuss." Hijichu was a bit surprised. The money was actually given to him by Seth's father, York, and not the people who took Nyenji away? If it was to find out the lawyer's trial strategy, it would make sense. Sometimes a conversation between lawyers in the car was enough for the other party to analyze for a long time. For such important information to only give him 100,000 euros, York and his men were the ones who got the better end of the deal. Hijichu walked over and looked down at the driver. "But you came to the Konichi several times before. What were you doing?" "When that person called me, he told me a lot about Lawyer Gu. It sounded like he was her friend and asked me to recommend a place that needed to be quiet and hidden. There weren't many tourists and it had to be close to the road into the mountains. I came to see it a few times." The driver lied on the ground and mumbled the truth. He was really afraid of being thrown into the lake by these people and choking. "So you provided the route and location and tricked Lawyer Gu to come here, right?" Hijichu stepped on the driver's left cheek. "Speak." The driver's fat face was almost deformed from being stepped on. He stuttered, I didn't know they wanted to harm Lawyer Gu. I thought it was her friend. The Konichi is full of people. How could something happen? Lawyer Gu also asked me to bring her to the Konichi to see a friend. He really didn't know what these people were going to do. The $100,000 was to buy information from these lawyers, which was a very fair price. He didn't expect it to be to buy Lawyer Gu's life. Lawyer Gu told you to see a friend? Hijichu was surprised again. He thought Gu Nyenji was purely tricked by the driver. Now it seemed that wasn't the case. Or was there more than one group of people who tricked her? Hijichu's heart tightened. He asked sternly, "Who did Lawyer Gu want to see? If you dare lie, I'll make sure you don't see tomorrow's sun." The driver was terrified and burst into tears. "It's true, Mr. He. I don't know who it was, but Lawyer Gu really said she came to see a friend. And she was very happy. She kept laughing in the car, Mr. He." I didn't lie. I really didn't lie. Hijichu withdrew his foot from the driver's face and rubbed it on the grass in disgust. He turned around and said, "Put a lie detector on him and ask the question again." His personal assistant brought him a portable chair and placed it under the big tree by the lake. The bodyguards set up all kinds of electronic equipment to monitor the area within a 5-mile radius. The driver was taken to the other side for a lie detector test. The lie detector was carried with him to see if the driver was telling the truth. As time passed, Hijichu's heart burned with anxiety. His expression grew colder and colder. The sky had completely darkened. A cool breeze blew across the surface of the lake, carrying with it a heavy dampness that assaulted one's face. Hijichu closed his eyes and supported his head with one hand as he leaned against the armrest of the portable chair. 5 minutes later, his assistant came down and said, "Mr. He, the lie detector test passed." What he said at the end was the truth. Hijichu opened his eyes. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes sparkled. He stood up from the portable chair and walked around. He looked at the Koenig Sea, then at the Alps not far away. He thought about what the driver had said. Why did the other party ask the driver to find a place closer to the road into the mountains? Did they take Nienji to the Alps? The thought made Hijichu's heart sink. If it was in the Alps that ran through almost all of Europe, how could he find her as soon as possible? He looked up at the night sky. The moon was bright and the stars twinkled. The stars twinkled. The stars. Hijichu's heart skipped a beat. He remembered what Smith and the others had said. Since 2 days ago when he called Gu Nienji's phone, it was out of service. Was her phone turned off or thrown away? If it was turned off, it would be fine. He had a way to find Gu Nienji's location through her phone. But if it was thrown away, so what if he found her phone? At most, it could prove that she had appeared somewhere. It was even possible that the other party had deliberately thrown it away, tampered with it, or set up a trap. What should he do? Chapter 654. Hijichu rubbed his forehead in annoyance as he paced around the Koenig Sea. It looked like it was unlikely to find Gu Nienji directly, so he had to start from the side. Hijichu calmed down when he remembered Seth from the video they received. He had been too anxious and too worried. How could he have forgotten the most important person? Since Seth was involved, Seth's stepfather York must have helped a lot. It would be strange if York didn't know about Gu Nienji's disappearance. But dealing with someone like York couldn't be the same as dealing with this driver. Hijichu clenched his fists and prayed to the night sky. He only hoped Gu Nienji could think of a way to survive. No matter what, there was only hope if she survived. Go back to the city? Hijichu made up his mind and turned to get in the car. Hijichu had just sat in the car and hadn't even caught his breath when his phone rang. What is it? Hijichu unlocked the phone. It was a call from the agency that was helping him investigate the license plate numbers. The person was very excited and spoke German quickly and anxiously like a machine gun. Someone called and said they saw these 2 cars. Hijichu immediately said, "Send the address to my phone. I'll go check it right away." He was outside and could check where the 2 cars were on the way. Hijichu originally thought the other party had used the 2 cars to commit the crime and would definitely abandon the cars now that they were found. In the end, he didn't know if they were too careless or believed they were hidden well and wouldn't be found. Anyway, when the addresses of the 2 cars were sent, Hijichu discovered one car was not far from the outskirts of Munich, and the other was in the parking lot of a small clinic in downtown Munich. Let's go to this place first. Hijichu sent the address in the outskirts of Munich to his people. A few Hummer SUVs left the Koenig Sea as fast as lightning and headed toward BR under the cover of the night. They drove quickly and kept overtaking other cars on the highway. In the end, it only took them an hour to reach the address. The address was in a medium-sized community in the outskirts of Munich. The community was filled with single-family villas, and there was a small garden in front of each house. The place was not particularly big, but there was a front yard and a back garden. There were many tall pine trees planted here. The advantage was that they were evergreen all year round and could always maintain the privacy of this community. Even with satellites, it was difficult to detect the street view here. The disadvantage was that it was gloomy all year round and the lighting was not very good. Hijichu didn't get out of the car. He rolled down the window and saw the house in front of him. It was a large villa with nothing special about it. It was the kind of house that was commonly seen in the suburbs of Munich. It was neither flashy nor low-key. It was hidden in the community and was not conspicuous at all. There was a very common flower bed in front of the door. There were triangular plum blossoms and a few stalks of roses. They were bright red and purple. There was a kind of vulgar liveliness, but it was nothing special. If they hadn't found this place because of the license plate number, they might not have been able to find this place by themselves. Since there were so many similar houses on the outskirts of Munich, it would be difficult to notice this place without a special reason. Go take a look. Hijichu looked away and ordered his subordinates. A bodyguard got out of the car and rang the doorbell. After a long time, no one came out. Finally, someone in the house next door heard it and came out to the courtyard to look at them curiously. The bodyguard went over to greet him and asked, "Hi, do you know if this family is home?" The neighbor shook his head with a smile. "I haven't seen anyone come out of this house in a while. I think they moved away." They moved away. The bodyguard was shocked but still thanked the neighbor and came back to inform Hijichu. Hijichu frowned and looked at the house again from the car. "Bring someone inside to take a look." The bodyguard nodded and turned to call over a few of his skilled colleagues. They climbed over the wall and entered the courtyard of the villa. The neighbor next to them stared at them with wide eyes. Another bodyguard walked over with a smile and explained to him, "That family owes our boss money and hasn't returned it. They haven't even returned our calls. They recently canceled all their phone numbers, so we came to take a look." The neighbor stared blankly at the group of people who didn't look like good people and immediately put a stamp on their heads. "Loan sharks. Oh, you guys go ahead then. I'll go in." The neighbor stammered and quickly slipped back to his house. The bodyguard didn't care and noted down the neighbor's house number just in case. He then walked back to check on the people who went in. 10 minutes later, the people who had climbed over the wall came out again. They reported to him, "There's really no one inside. There are only a few cars parked in the backyard. One of them has the license plate we checked, but there are no clues about that car. It's the car behind." Someone added, and everyone understood. The car parked in the villa wasn't the one that had stuffed Gunyenji into, but the car following behind. There shouldn't be any clues inside. Just to be safe, Hijichu instructed them, "Go in and take a look. Take photos." The bodyguards returned and took many photos inside and outside of the car. They made a few marks and destroyed the car's engine before climbing over the wall. Hijichu looked at the photos they took frame by frame and didn't see anything out of the ordinary. He thought that only by finding the car that had stuffed Gunyenji into in the video would they truly have some clues. Hijichu put away the photos and didn't say anything else. He waved for them to get into the car. "Let's go to the clinic in the city." When they arrived at the clinic in downtown Munich, they discovered it was already empty. There were several cars parked in the parking lot behind the building. One of them was the car that had stuffed Gunyenji into. It was also the car that Seth had driven. This time Hijichu got out of the car and personally went to the car. Under the night sky, he looked at the car with an expression as cold as the South Pole. Just one look at him would freeze people to death. "Open it." After a long time he spat out 2 words from between his teeth. His voice was cold to the extreme. The subordinates he had brought this time were all especially skilled in this area. For example, they could pry open car doors even without keys. One of the bodyguards walked over with a retractable iron ruler that was 2 feet long and 1 centimeter wide. He inserted the ruler vertically into the handle of the car and turned it for a while before dexterously opening the door. Hijichu was the first to get into the car. The interior had obviously been cleaned and the seats were all new. However, the car's exterior was so shabby that it made the interior seem brand new. It looked like the interior had been completely replaced. Hijichu slowly exhaled. "Take this car back for a forensic analysis." He got out of the car. Returning to his own car, Hijichu propped his chin on his hand and thought about the day's findings. First, Nyenji had been taken from the Konigsee. Where did she go after that? The most likely place was the Alps. But why did they take her into the Alps? The 2 cars that had taken her had been found, which meant they weren't with Nyenji. There were only 2 possibilities. 1. After leaving the Konigsee, they drove directly into the mountains and then came out again. 2. After leaving the Konigsee, they changed cars and didn't enter the mountains, or they changed cars after entering the mountains. If it was the first possibility, they drove directly into the mountains and then came out again. This was the most dangerous possibility. If they went in and came out, but Nyenji was nowhere to be seen, and the car had been renovated, there was only one possibility. A fatal conflict had occurred in the car and left traces that were difficult to erase, so the other party had to renovate the entire car. Under what circumstances would a fatal conflict occur? It must have been that silly girl Nyenji desperately fighting back. Thinking of this, Hijichu's eyes couldn't help turning red again. The last time he had been in so much pain was 7 years ago when Nyenji disappeared. He hadn't shed a tear in so many years, but this time it was for her. Hijichu tried his best to hold himself back. He closed his eyes and covered them with his hand. He sat quietly for a while before finally holding back the bitter tears. His heartbeat gradually returned to normal, and Hijichu continued to think of the second possibility. The two cars didn't directly enter the mountains, or they changed cars after entering the mountains. This possibility was slightly better than the first because it meant there was a high chance that Nyenji was still alive, although she might have been tortured even more. At that moment Hijichu actually couldn't figure out if he wanted Nyenji to survive no matter what, or not suffer the heartbreaking torture. No matter which possibility it would be a lifetime nightmare for Nyenji. Hijichu pursed his lips. This time he was going to take her home and no one could stop him. Whether she was alive or dead, he was going to take her home and be with her forever. Hijichu thought about it the entire way. Time flew, and before long they returned to the Hilton Hotel. A bodyguard came down to ask Hijichu, "Mr. He, what do you plan to do?" They had towed the car behind the Hummer SUV and parked it in the parking lot of the Hilton Hotel. Hijichu got out of the car and looked at the car. "Do an autopsy, then hand the car over to the police." "Yes, Mr. He." The captain of the bodyguards quickly saluted, his military habits showing again. Hijichu glanced at him. "You don't have to do this. You've already retired." "He, Mr. He, I'll be careful." He had just retired and became a mercenary, so his military habits were still very strong. "Okay, tell your men that the forensic analysis of the car will be done tonight. Also, I've booked the entire 16th floor of the Hilton Hotel for you. You can stay there." Hijichu finished speaking and turned to leave. As for the forensic analysis of the car, the mercenaries had expertise in this area, so Hijichu didn't have to worry about it. He only had to return to his room and wait for the results. He returned to his room with the 4 bodyguards, and Smith and the other 3 legal assistants also came to talk to him. After all, he was also their boss. They would feel bad if they lost their colleague when they brought him to Germany for a lawsuit. Hijichu saw them but didn't have any intention of inviting them to sit down. He was mentally and physically exhausted and wasn't in the mood to entertain these irrelevant people. "What's the matter?" He resumed his cool and composed demeanor and put his hands in his trouser pockets as he stood in front of the window. "Lawyer He, is there anything we can help you with?" Smith walked up and asked. "I can go to the police station again and ask Seth about the problem. He's already been on the run for 10 days. Hijichu shook his head. "I said you don't have to interfere with this matter. I know what I'm doing. You can go back. If you have nothing else to do, you can ask the court for the results of the first trial of Li Haiqing's case. If the verdict is still delayed, then go to the higher court and sue the judge in this case." Hijichu's expression was somewhat hostile, as if he was saying, "I'll make life miserable for anyone who makes me unhappy." This was something Smith and the others could do, so they immediately said resolutely, "Yes. Lawyer He, the 4 of us won't do anything else. We have to ask the court to get the verdict of the first trial." The results of the forensic analysis were placed on Hijichu's desk the next morning. First of all, the tires of the 2 cars were tested and confirmed to have been in the Alps. That was because there were traces of soil unique to the Alps in the gaps of the tires. Secondly, by spraying luminol in the car, it was confirmed that there were indeed bloodstains in the car. Also, the forensic experts confirmed that there were signs of a struggle in the car. In particular, the bottom of one of the seats had been derailed by an external force and had been straightened afterwards. When he saw the bloodstains, Hijichu's heart almost jumped out of his throat. However, when he saw the blood test report, he finally sighed in relief because the blood type wasn't Gunyenji's. Gunyenji was omnipotent type O, but the blood type in the car was type A. If Hijichu remembered correctly, that bastard Seth was type A, so he immediately ordered someone to go to the court and ask for Seth's blood sample for comparison. The DNA comparison proved that the bloodstains in the car were Seth's. Something major had happened in the car, but it was Seth who was bleeding, not Gunyenji. Could it be inferred that Seth was the one who didn't get what he wanted, not Gunyenji? With that thought, Hijichu's anxiety and unease slowly subsided. He closed his eyes and thought about everything from beginning to end again, including the new clues and new evidence. Hijichu opened his eyes and looked at the Alps in the distance. What exactly happened in these 2 cars? And where was Nyenji? When Hijichu arrived in Germany and began secretly searching for Gunyenji, Gunyenji had just been carried out of the Alps by Reinitz. She had been sick for 2 days, but she didn't have a high fever. It wasn't a serious illness and she didn't lose consciousness. She was just physically weak, so she panted heavily after walking for a while. Reinitz realized that it would be faster if he carried her on his back instead of walking and stopping. The two of them had been camping in the mountains for 2 days, and thanks to Reinitz's strong ability to survive in the wild, they were able to make it out safely. However, the two of them had been exercising excessively for 2 days, and even a strong man like Reinitz couldn't take it. He had lost a lot of weight and his blonde hair was tangled. A light golden beard grew on his face, but his blue eyes were even brighter than before. "Are you thirsty?" Reinitz carefully put Gunyenji down and leaned against a rock. "I still have some water here." There were 2 bottles of mineral water in his duffel bag. For the past 2 days, only Gunyenji had drunk the water in the bottle. Reinitz had found mountain springs, rivers and lakes to drink. Gunyenji saw that there was only a thin layer of water left in the bottle. Because she had a low fever, she was especially thirsty and drank a lot. She also knew that Reinitz had given her these 2 bottles of mineral water, which were very precious in the wilderness, so she was very grateful. Reaching out to hold the bottle, Gunyenji looked at Reinitz's thin face and pushed it in front of him, wanting to give it to him. Reinitz understood what she meant, and his blue eyes became even brighter. "I'm not thirsty. Here, drink." He opened the bottle cap and carefully supported Gunyenji's neck with one hand. With the other, he placed the bottle to Gunyenji's cracked lips. "Open your mouth." Gunyenji could only slowly open her mouth and let Reinitz feed her. She only took a sip to moisten her lips before shaking her head. "I don't want it." Reinitz smiled and his blue eyes sparkled again. "Drink it all. We're about to leave." "Really?" Gunyenji was extremely excited. After wandering around the Alps for more than 10 days, she felt that her body had reached its limit. That was why she fell sick when victory was in sight. Holding onto Reinitz's hand, Gunyenji slowly stood up and looked at the winding road down the mountain. At the end of the mountain path was an asphalt road, and further ahead was a beautiful town at the end of the asphalt road. "We really made it out." Gunyenji was overjoyed. She was so excited that she felt her temples throbbing and her blood pressure rising rapidly. Soon her vision went black and she fainted. Reinitz hurriedly supported her and carried her on his back as they walked down the mountain. He originally thought it would be very tiring along the way and that he would be free once they reached the bottom of the mountain. However, along the way he realized that this was perhaps the sweetest burden of his life. Reinitz carried Gunyenji on his back in a daze. Step by step he walked slowly and steadily. The distance that should have been covered in half a day took him a full day. By the time they entered the town, it was already midnight. He carried Gunyenji into the town's only clinic. There was a small emergency room inside. After the bearded doctor in the emergency room took Gunyenji's blood pressure, he was so shocked that his glasses almost popped out. "Such high blood pressure. Will she still be able to wake up? You're only bringing her to the hospital now? Are you trying to murder her?" It was even more severe than a stroke. Reinitz was also shocked when he saw the data displayed on the doctor's blood pressure monitor. He froze for a full half a minute and his mind went blank. He couldn't recover for a long time. The bearded doctor poked him twice in the arm before he finally said, "Then can you check for me? Is she still alive?" When he said the word, alive, Reinitz's voice actually choked a little. Chapter 655. The bearded doctor glared at him. "If she's not alive, I'll call the police to arrest you right now. You're a murderer." Reinitz let out a sigh of relief. He looked up at the ceiling of the emergency room and let out a long sigh. Then he turned around and walked out. "Hey, where are you going?" The bearded doctor panicked. Although she's still alive, she could die at any moment. Such a high blood pressure defied all the basic medical knowledge the doctor had learned. He couldn't understand how she could still be alive. Reinitz didn't even turn around. "I'll go make a call. Please wait a moment." After leaving the emergency room, Reinitz took out his phone and dialed a number. He said calmly, "I need a helicopter. Yes, I have a seriously ill patient here. I'll give you 20 minutes. Be there immediately." After making the call, Reinitz put away his phone and found the clinic's on-call room. He politely asked the chubby nurse to borrow the landline phone. The nurse was dazzled by his handsome face. Although he was thin, had stubble on his chin, and his clothes weren't very neat, he stared at her steadily. His blue eyes seemed to have a magical power, and the nurse couldn't help but do as he said. "This is the phone. Sis, please use it." The nurse stuttered as her face flushed. Reinitz wasn't as gentle in front of the nurse as he was with Gunyenji. His attitude was indifferent and restrained. With a hint of alienation, he took the phone from the nurse and began dialing. May I ask if this is the Alps Ranger Base? I want to ask if you guys managed to save Mother Hannah from the fire 2 days ago? Those forest rangers all knew Mother Hannah and had eaten her white sausages. The ranger's affirmative reply came through the phone. Mother Hannah? We rescued her as soon as we could, but she was in the basement for too long and fainted. There are signs of dehydration, so she's still in the hospital. Reinitz sighed again. Thank God. Please help me transfer Mother Hannah to Berlin's St. Joseph Hospital. Yes, contact them and tell them my name. They will take her in. After making the call, he covered the phone with his hand and pondered for a moment before dialing another number. At this hour, it wasn't a special agency, nor was it a 24-hour ranger base. No one picked up, so he left a voice message. Mr. Hans, I'm sorry. I quit. I won't come to work tomorrow. After Reinitz said this, he put down the phone and pushed it back to the nurse. The nurse looked at him with her mouth open. After a while she said, Sir, why did you resign? Are you sick? Reinitz glanced at her and didn't say anything. His expression was cold and dignified. The nurse was frightened by his gaze and didn't dare ask again. She lowered her head and pretended to fill out forms. Reinitz walked into the emergency room expressionlessly and saw that the bearded doctor was still looking at Gunyenji's data. He walked over to remove the blood pressure monitor and stethoscope from Gunyenji's arm. Since she's in danger, I already called the hospital in Berlin. They agreed to send a helicopter to pick her up. Berlin was the capital of Germany and had the best hospitals in the country. Of course, a village doctor like the bearded man couldn't compare. As soon as Reinitz said this, the bearded doctor looked relieved and said, Then you have to be careful. Her data has stabilized, but you have to remember not to let her emotions fluctuate too much. Otherwise, if her blood pressure rises again, even the Virgin Mary won't be able to save her. Reinitz didn't say anything and sat quietly in the cherry armchair in front of Gunyenji's bed. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. His hands were clasped together to support his chin as he stared unblinkingly at Gunyenji's snow-white face. Half an hour passed quickly, and the roar of a helicopter could be heard in the sky. The bearded doctor pushed the door open and said, The plane has arrived. How are you going to take her up? Reinitz stood up and straightened his clothes. We have someone coming to pick her up. Before they could finish speaking, a few doctors in white coats and masks pushed a simple mobile hospital bed in and nodded at Reinitz. Where is the patient? Reinitz walked to the bed and carefully carried Gunyenji horizontally and placed her on the mobile hospital bed. Let's go. The doctors who got off the helicopter quickly pushed Gunyenji onto the helicopter, and Reinitz followed. Soon, the helicopter turned its propellers and took to the sky, flying straight to Berlin. An hour later, they landed on the top floor of the Charlotte Hospital building in Berlin. Charlotte Hospital was the best hospital in all of Berlin and also the best and most expensive hospital in all of Germany. Reinitz carried Gunyenji, who was wrapped in a blanket, out of the helicopter. His expression was extremely cold. He didn't speak to anyone and walked straight to the elevator on the top floor to the VIP room 1 on the 18th floor. The room was equipped with the most advanced medical equipment and various instruments in all of Germany. It was comparable to the best Johns Hopkins Hospital in the United States. He carried her all the way to the VIP room 1 and placed her on the clean, snow-white bed. The conditions here were obviously much better than the small clinics in the countryside near the Alps. 2 female nurses walked in and said to Reinitz, Sir, please leave us for a moment. We need to change her into the hospital gown. Reinitz nodded. I'll be at the door. He then walked out. The 2 female nurses helped Gunyenji take off the nun's uniform, as well as the tattered sportswear and underwear underneath. They directly put the hospital gown on her. It was actually a striped gown that covered her from head to toe. After changing, the 2 nurses pushed the door open and said to Reinitz, You can go in now. As soon as Reinitz entered, Germany's most famous neurosurgeons and neurologists also came to Gunyenji's room to examine her. All sorts of instruments were connected to her brain, heart, and pulse. Her blood pressure, heartbeat, and brain waves were all carefully measured. However, when the doctors were about to draw Gunyenji's blood, Reinitz stopped them. That's all for today. She's still very weak. She can undergo a blood test when she's better. Of course, the doctors could only listen to Reinitz. Okay, sir. The doctors looked at the data displayed on the instruments and didn't think it was too outrageous. Temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit, low fever. Blood pressure normal. Heartbeat normal. Pulse normal. Do we need to do a CT scan? We'll do it when she wakes up. Reinitz didn't want Gunyenji to be tortured again. You just need to tell me how is her health condition? So far everything is normal. She's just a bit weak, probably caused by hunger and thirst. The doctor was confused. May I ask, is she a patient from Africa? Malnutrition caused by hunger and thirst is probably only found in the African region of the world. Reinitz shook his head. No. However, he didn't explain further and said to the doctors, give her 2 bottles of nutrient fluid to quickly replenish her nutrients. It was mainly glucose which could quickly replenish her energy. Then when will her fever go down? Is it because of the infection in her body? Do you need an aspirin? Reinitz asked again. He was a bit worried about Gunyenji's persistent low fever. The doctors said that it was probably due to malnutrition that caused the body's immune system to drop. As long as she was replenished with nutrients, when she recovered, the low fever would naturally go down. They all advocated that anti-inflammatory drugs should be avoided if possible. Reinitz glanced at Gunyenji and nodded silently. Okay, we'll see tomorrow. It was already past 2 in the morning. After the doctors left, Reinitz specifically asked someone to send his clothes from his apartment. After the change of clothes arrived, he went to take a shower in the bathroom of the special care VIP single ward. After shaving in the bathroom, Reinitz remembered Gunyenji's nun uniform. For the past 2 days she had worn this wrinkled and dirty nun uniform all the way here. The black nun uniform made her small face look even more pitiful. Reinitz changed and walked out of the bathroom. He picked up his phone and began shopping for clothes for Gunyenji. He didn't know much about women's clothing brands, so he randomly searched online and found a designer brand, Fraser. This brand's women's clothing had good cuts and simple styles, and was sought after by high-income young women. Each piece was like a work of art. It combined Scandinavian style with German practicality. The pictures also looked especially suitable for Gunyenji's lively temperament. Reinitz looked at them one by one and smiled knowingly. He tapped on his phone screen repeatedly and bought dozens of clothes for Gunyenji. He bought almost all of Fraser's new designs for this season. Blouses, pants, skirts, dresses, windbreakers, matching shoes, scarves and headwear. Reinitz remembered that Gunyenji had beautiful long hair. It was black and shiny like seaweed and had natural curls. He hesitated for a moment when it came to underwear, but in the end he opened the most famous lingerie website in Germany and bought a dozen sets of bras and underwear from Gunyenji. He remembered that Gunyenji said she was a D cup, so he bought them all D cups and the underwear in the smallest size. She was so thin that her waist wasn't even as long as his palm. He didn't know if the underwear would be able to hang around her waist. Reinitz even had the urge to buy juvenile brands for Gunyenji, but they were too ugly and didn't fit his taste, so he gave up. After buying clothes for Gunyenji, Reinitz went to a skincare website to buy a set of La Mar skincare products for Gunyenji. Only then did he relax and fall asleep on the sofa. This time it wasn't on a grassy rock in the Alps, but in the best hospital room in all of Germany. The long sofa there was custom made by the best furniture manufacturer. It was more ergonomic than a normal mattress. Reinitz slept very soundly. When he woke up it was already 5 o'clock the next day. The 15 hours of sleep had finally allowed him to recover. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Gunyenji sleeping on the hospital bed. Her black hair and snow-white skin contrasted so strongly and vividly. It was clearly the simplest color, but it was like a flash of light. Reinitz looked away and took a deep breath. He got up from the sofa and walked over to Gunyenji's hospital bed to look down. Gunyenji hadn't woken up yet. She was still asleep. The equipment connected to the hospital bed showed that her vital signs were all normal. It was as if the explosive blood pressure data he saw in the village clinic last night had been an illusion. Reinitz slowly reached out and held Gunyenji's hand. He was about to bend down when he heard the sound of the ward door behind him. Someone had come in. He quietly tucked Gunyenji's wrist under the thin blanket and straightened up. Turning around, he saw an old man with a head of white hair but a rosy complexion. He looked very well standing in front of him and smiling at him. "Reinitz, I knew you wouldn't let me down." Reinitz smiled and nodded slightly at the old man. "Mr. Lidishi." "Yeah." Lidishi leaned on a cane and slowly walked over to Gunyenji's hospital bed. Standing in front of her hospital bed, Lidishi clasped his hands on the cane and looked at Gunyenji like he was looking at a rare work of art. He exclaimed in English, "She's perfect, isn't she?" Reinitz stood behind him with his hands behind his back. His shoulders were straight, but he didn't respond. Lidishi didn't want to hear a response either. He was just sighing. "When will she wake up?" Lidishi looked at the various equipment next to Gunyenji's hospital bed. "How did she get sick?" Reinitz finally said, I don't know. I'm still observing. Okay, you treat her well. Li Deshi looked at Gu Nianji for a while, then patted Reinitz on the shoulder. I'm leaving. Contact me if anything happens. Reinitz nodded and watched Li Deshi leave. Shortly after Li Deshi left, the clothes, shoes, socks and skincare products that Reinitz had ordered for Gu Nianji arrived one after another. Because he had chosen express delivery and paid a high shipping fee, they were all delivered within a day. The armchair in front of Gu Nianji's bed was filled with boxes of all sizes. She would see them as soon as she woke up. However, Gu Nianji slept for 3 days and 3 nights. Fortunately, the best doctor in all of Germany was by her side to ensure that Gu Nianji was fine. Her condition had been very stable, and all her data indicators were steadily rising. The malnutrition has been resolved and her body temperature is normal. There is no longer a low fever, which means that our previous diagnosis was correct. There is no need to give her penicillin or aspirin. As long as her nutrition keeps up, her low fever will subside on its own. The doctor was very satisfied with Gu Nianji's recovery. It was completely in line with his expectations. Reinitz stood beside him with his arms crossed and frowned. But why hasn't she woken up yet? She hadn't woken up for 3 days and 3 nights. Wasn't it because she was sick? From the data, she isn't sick. The doctor carefully checked the equipment again to ensure that there was no malfunction. She's just asleep. Reinitz looked at him in confusion. Reinitz, you have to know that the human body is like a sophisticated instrument. It has its own rules. The human body is most able to repair itself when it's asleep, so don't worry. This girl is just too weak and tired, so she needs more time to recover than others. The doctor gave his own medical explanation. Reinitz didn't really believe it, but he didn't continue arguing with the doctor. He nodded. That better be the case. After the doctor left, Reinitz sat on the sofa and took out his phone to look at the news. There were 2 particularly sensational events in Munich recently, and the entire German media was reporting on them. The first was the Munich tourism department collecting videos from a certain area of the Königssee for a competition. The requirements were complete and unedited, and they said it was to promote the Königsee's tourism resources. The second was a large reward for 2 cars and the license plate numbers were given. Although it was already over because of the large reward, there were also many people who received the reward. Therefore, there were even more people who spoke up. It was a hot topic on the internet, and there were news and comments about these 2 pieces of news everywhere. Reinitz looked at the 2 license plate numbers and frowned imperceptibly. His fingers rubbed the phone for a while before Reinitz finally opened his contact list and called the relevant department. Some news should be deleted from the internet after it's over. Do you want to keep it for Christmas? He spoke to the other side without any reservations. The other side immediately accepted his suggestion and began to secretly delete all comments and news related to these 2 pieces of news. At the same time, they buried the 2 pieces of news to the bottom. Soon, the 2 pieces of news could no longer be seen on the German website. For the public, news had a time limit. As long as no one intentionally set the pace, the new news would naturally suppress the old news. Reinitz scrolled through his phone again and felt the internet was much more pleasing to the eye. On the morning of the 4th day, the sun had just risen, and the first rays of dawn shone into the hospital room, creating a golden glow. Gu Nianji finally woke up. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the snow-white ceiling and the modern shadowless lights on the ceiling. Gu Nianji blinked and moved her gaze from the ceiling to the side. She saw Reinitz sleeping on the sofa across from the bed. He wore a handsome hunting jacket that revealed the crisp white collar of his shirt. His black trousers wrapped around his long legs as he lay on the sofa. His shirt and trousers were slightly wrinkled, but he didn't look dispirited. His cold facial features had a religious beauty to them, as if all the joy in the world had nothing to do with him. Gu Nianji looked at Reinitz as if she was admiring a beautiful oil painting. Reinitz abruptly woke up, and before his handsome face could soften, he saw Gu Nianji looking at him. Her large black eyes were naturally warm, and as soon as he saw them, the icy coldness immediately transformed into the warmth of spring. You're awake? Reinitz stood up and asked very gently. He walked to her bedside and reached out to touch her forehead. You don't have a fever anymore. Gu Nianji tried to curl the corners of her mouth into a grateful smile. Thank you, Reinitz. Chapter 656. You've said it many times. Reinitz didn't care and helped her sit up. What do you want to eat? Do you want a shower? Gu Nianji immediately felt uncomfortable and dirty all over. She looked down at herself and saw that she had already changed into a hospital gown, but there was nothing under it. Reinitz sensed her gaze and said gently, "Two female nurses changed it for you. Can you move? I'll ask them to help you shower." Gunyenji felt relieved when she heard the nurses had helped her change, but she shook her head to reject them. "I can shower myself." "But..." She rubbed her stomach. "I'm a little hungry. I want to eat something before I shower." She knew she must look unkempt and dirty, but she didn't care about showing it in front of Reinitz. Because Gunyenji treated Reinitz as a friend, she didn't need to think about showing her best side in front of him. If Wu Xiaoheng was here, Gunyenji's first thought would be to immediately shower and change her clothes. Also, when they were escaping together in the Alps, they had seen each other's dirtiest and ugliest sides. Reinitz smiled. "What do you want to eat?" "I want to eat McDonald's." Gunyenji licked her lips. She suddenly crazily wanted to eat junk food. It was high in calories and tasted good, so it was more suitable for her current situation. Reinitz said, "I'll get someone to buy it for you, but you can only eat fish and chips. If you want to eat something else, I'll take you to eat when you're better." Gunyenji nodded and said happily, "Sure, you saved me. I want to treat you to a meal to express my gratitude." "Just treat me to a meal?" Reinitz looked at her, his blue eyes smiling. "That's not enough, right? Then what do you want? Tell me. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely agree." Gunyenji shrugged nonchalantly. "As long as you can do it?" Reinitz swallowed the words he wanted to say and smiled. "Treating me to a meal is definitely not enough. You have to treat me to at least 3 meals. "No problem." Gunyenji extended her hand. "Come, let's high-five." Reinitz reached out with a smile and high-fived her 3 times. "Remember, you owe me 3 meals." Of course, of course." Gunyenji's energy gradually recovered, and her speech became more lively. Seeing Reinitz reminded her of Mother Hannah. She couldn't help but ask, "Oh yeah, do you have any news about Mother Hannah?" "Oh yes." Reinitz smiled as he handed the phone to Gunyenji. "Look, this is the latest photo of Mother Hannah. She's recuperating at St. Joseph's Hospital in Berlin. When you're better, we can go visit her together." "In Berlin?" Gunyenji frowned. "That's so far away. Isn't it inconvenient?" Reinitz couldn't help but laugh. "Serious, you're in Berlin?" "I'm in Berlin?" Gunyenji was shocked. "I'm not in a small town near the Alps near Munich? How can there be such a good hospital there?" Reinitz pursed his lips. He still had lingering fears about what happened back then. "You were too sick, so I found a hospital in Berlin to bring you here." Gunyenji scanned the room and confirmed that she was indeed in a very high-class room. She hadn't seen many of the equipment before. Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat. She remembered her strange healing abilities and excellent body constitution. She had a sense of resistance toward the equipment here. Gunyenji shifted uneasily on the bed. She looked down and murmured, "Reinitz, I'm better now. Can I be discharged? I can't eat or sleep here." She knew she'd overdone it the moment she said it. As expected, Reinitz laughed. "You can't sleep here? You slept for 3 days and 3 nights before waking up?" Gunyenji closed her eyes. She was extremely embarrassed, but she forced herself to calm down. "I wasn't sleeping. I passed out." Passing out for 3 days and 3 nights was better than saying she'd slept for 3 days and 3 nights. Reinitz didn't correct her. He smiled as he listened to her continuously find all kinds of reasons to leave the hospital. Of course he didn't agree, but he didn't reject her either. He listened to her act shamelessly, and his mood seemed to improve. Especially when she talked for a long time and he shook his head, she immediately pouted. He couldn't help but laugh. Gunyenji couldn't help getting angry no matter what she said. She turned her head away angrily and said, "I'm going to shower. You can leave." "Didn't you say you'd shower after eating something? You're not hungry anymore?" Gunyenji was speechless. The two of them were at a stalemate in the ward until someone knocked on the door and delivered the fish steak and fries that Reinitz had asked someone to buy for her. Gunyenji couldn't help turning her head when she smelled the food. Her gaze fell on the red box with the letter M written on it in Reinitz's hand. McDonald's all over the world were the same. Reinitz took the fish steak and fries out of the box and placed them on a disposable hospital tray. He placed it in front of Gunyenji. There was a food tray on the hospital bed where Gunyenji was sitting. He opened it from the side of the bed and dragged it over. She looked down at the steaming golden fish steak. The aroma made her salivate. Gunyenji finally failed and picked up the fish steak with her hands to eat. Reinitz didn't say anything. He poured her a glass of milk and heated it up in the microwave. He sat quietly to the side and watched her eat. Gunyanji didn't look at him. She closed her eyes and drank the milk as she ate. When she finished, she threw the tray away. I want a shower. Okay. Reinitz slowly stood up. I'll be outside. Call me when you're done. Call you for what? I'll sleep after I shower. Gunyanji continued to snort and turned her head to show that she was unhappy. Reinitz took out a cigarette from his pocket and played with it. His slender fingers were very nimble. You don't want to see Mother Hannah? Fine, you win. Gunyanji was instantly discouraged. She didn't argue with Reinitz anymore. She lifted the thin blanket with a red face and walked to the bathroom. Wait. Reinitz stopped her. From the pile of exquisite packaging on the sofa, he picked out a light gray wide-sleeved sweater, a pure black wool skirt and a set of underwear. He handed them to her. Here, change them. Gunyanji felt her empty body under the hospital gown. Although she was reluctant, she still took the clothes from him and asked, Where are my own clothes? Take them to wash. Oh? Where are my things? Gunyanji was nervous. The things inside were all her treasures. They had gone through fire and water with her on this trip. She already had feelings for them. They're all here. I took them out for you and put them here. Reinitz handed her a black plastic bag with her Swiss Army knife key ring, a Zippo lighter, a pack of sanitary napkins, she blushed, and her wallet. Gunyanji was relieved. She took the black plastic bag and the clothes Reinitz gave her into the bathroom. She was still a little weak and had difficulty sitting up. But after eating, she was able to get up and go to the bathroom soon. She recovered so quickly. Reinitz looked thoughtfully in the direction Gunyanji disappeared to for a while before turning to leave. He closed the door to Gunyanji's room. There were 2 German bodyguards standing on both sides. When they saw him come out, they quickly saluted him. Reinitz didn't look at them. Watch the door. Don't let anyone in. As he spoke, he took the cigarette in his hand and walked to the smoking area. Most of the places in the hospital were non-smoking areas. If you wanted to smoke, you could only go downstairs to the designated smoking area in front of the building. Reinitz lit the cigarette and took a drag. His eyes stared blankly ahead. He didn't seem to be thinking about anything, but he also seemed to be thinking about a lot of things. From when he first met Gunyanji, to the 2 of them relying on each other to escape in the Alps, and then thinking about Gunyanji, Reinitz looked down and threw the cigarette butt in his hand into the trash can. He flicked his fingers and walked to the hospital. He felt like he was thinking too much and had almost forgotten what he did for a living. When he returned to Gunyanji's room, she had already finished showering and was sitting on the sofa in a daze. Looking at her from behind, one could see that her dark, seaweed-like hair was draped over her light gray sweater. Her black tunic skirt made her slender waist look like a young willow tree that had just sprouted its tender branches in spring. Reinitz admired Gunyanji's reassuring figure at the door for a while before knocking on the door and coughing softly. Gunyanji composed herself and looked back to see that Reinitz had indeed returned. She stood up and walked briskly towards him. She looked up with a smile on her face. Reinitz, didn't you say you were going to take me to see Mother Hannah? Gunyanji felt like she wouldn't be able to calm down until she saw with her own eyes that she was indeed safe and sound. Now. Reinitz looked at his watch. It was only 10 in the morning. That's fine. But can your body handle it? I'm fine. Gunyanji spun in a circle. Her skirt fluttered naturally and revealed her long, slender calves with graceful lines. I'm all better now. Reinitz looked away and said gently, Good. It seemed like he couldn't bear to reject any of her requests. He walked out of the ward and called for a taxi on his phone. He also called St. Joseph's Hospital before coming in to tell Gunyanji, We can go now. Gunyanji walked towards him with the black plastic bag. Reinitz was speechless. Why are you carrying this? Reinitz frowned. He felt that the black plastic bag in Gunyanji's hands was very incongruous with her ladylike attire. It was a disaster for Reinitz's sense of beauty. Gunyanji didn't want to give up on the plastic bag no matter what because it contained her things. She didn't want to let go of them for even a second. Since Gunyanji was so insistent, Reinitz had no choice but to let her carry him out of the Charlotte hospital. They got into a taxi, but Reinitz didn't take her directly to St. Joseph's Hospital. Instead, he took her to the flagship store of Hermes in Berlin. Gunyanji saw the store from the taxi and froze. She turned to look at Reinitz, her eyes sparkling. She didn't know what to think. Reinitz turned to look at her. His blue eyes seemed very deep but also very empty. Gunyanji had already returned to her usual cheerful self. She said to him, Reinitz, why did you bring me here? To buy a bag, of course. You'll only embarrass me in front of Mother Hannah if you carry this black plastic bag to the hospital. Reinitz opened the taxi door and got out first. He walked around to the other side of the car and opened the door for Gunyenji. He was very polite and very gentlemanly. Gunyenji didn't want to get out, but on second thought, what was the point of staying in the taxi? She still got out, but she didn't enter the Hermes store. She stood beside the taxi and squinted at the tall Hermes store door. She shook her head at Reinitz. No, this bag is too expensive. I don't want it. I can't afford it. I'll give it to you, Reinitz said gently as he reached out to take her hand. I can't afford it. Gunyenji tilted her head and rejected Reinitz's good intentions again. She wasn't someone who didn't know what was important. She accepted the luxury goods that Hua Xiaoheng bought for her without any qualms, but Reinitz couldn't. Reinitz looked at her deeply and said gently, "It's just a gift. What's wrong with not wanting it? Don't think too much about it." Gunyenji was speechless. Why do I feel like I'm being rebutted by someone else? She blinked and was about to think of another excuse to reject him when she suddenly remembered that she still had her wallet with her bank and credit cards. Although the credit limit wasn't as high as Hua Xiaoheng and He Jichu's cards, it was more than enough to buy a Hermes bag. If she used her card to buy a bag here, it would leave some clues for the people who were looking for her. Gunyenji immediately changed her mind and giggled. Fine, I was thinking too much. How about this, I'll buy it myself. She then looked at Reinitz. How did you know that I like Hermes bags the most? Really? I don't know. It's probably a coincidence. Reinitz laughed and held her hand as they walked into the Hermes flagship store. The clerks inside bowed to them, especially to Reinitz. Reinitz walked into the world's most famous luxury store with his back straight. He was as elegant as an old European aristocrat. He was a completely different person from the first time Gunyenji saw him, when he was a bare-chested mountain man chopping firewood. Gunyenji's eyes fell on the classic and new bags displayed in the store. Her eyes flashed and thought to herself that this person was really multifaceted. The gentle and honest alpine mountain man, the elegant demeanor of a European aristocrat in the Hermes flagship store. She wondered how Reinitz grew up. Which one do you like? I'll let them show you. Reinitz bowed his head and spoke English to her. Gunyenji snapped back to reality and immediately took a fancy to this spring's new Veru chain bag. The bag wasn't big, but it was just enough to carry all of her belongings. The color was very bright blue, and it reminded her of the deep blue lake she saw in the Alps. The price was also very affordable. It was only $8,000. It was a bit more expensive than other bags, but compared to Hermes' own bags, it was a good price. Most importantly, it wouldn't exceed Gunyenji's credit limit. She pointed to the Veru blue chain bag and said, "I'll take this one. It's more convenient to carry around." Small, exquisite, light, practical, and the color was bright and eye-catching. It met all of Gunyenji's requirements for a bag of this size. Reinitz also took a fancy to the bag at first glance, and the price should be within Gunyenji's acceptable range. It wouldn't be surprising to give it as a gift. He nodded and said to the employee, "I'll take this bag. Find a brand new one." The employee was a bit troubled and said, "This bag is the only one available for now. If you want it, we can." When Gunyenji heard this, she knew that the Hermes employees were playing the hunger marketing game again. They were always unwilling to sell it to you smoothly. Instead, they would ask you to buy a bunch of other belts, accessories, scarves, and so on. They claimed that they were bonding with the staff. Only after they got familiar with them would they tell you that the bag you wanted was in stock. They were actually trying to cause trouble. If they had it, I would buy it if I could afford it. If I couldn't, I wouldn't buy it. Why would there be so much drama? Gunyenji pouted and was about to say that she wouldn't sell it when Reinitz took out a card from his wallet and said dryly, "Do you have it in stock now?" The employee's eyes widened when she saw it. It was a Hermes VIP Gold card. Members with this card could spend 7 figures a year at Hermes, calculated in US dollars. Of course, these members could buy whatever they wanted as long as Hermes had it in stock. Yes, absolutely. The employee immediately made a 180-degree change from arrogance to deference. The corners of Gunyenji's mouth twitched as she looked down disapprovingly at her new shoes. It was a pair of Christian Louboutin's famous red-soled shoes. The upper was made of high-quality black calf leather, but the soles were bright red when they stepped on the ground. When they walked, only the bright red soles could be seen faintly, and there was a kind of ascetic coldness to it. Gunyenji knew that Reinitz had also bought these shoes for her. It was one thing to buy a famous brand, but he had actually bought this brand. Reinitz's aesthetics were probably similar to his personality. Gunyenji pondered in her heart and quickly glanced at Reinitz. Reinitz was looking at her, and their eyes met before looking away as if nothing had happened. Gunyenji found her LV wallet from the black plastic bag and took out a black card to pass to the employee. The employee didn't take it and only smiled at Reinitz. Reinitz took the black credit card from Gunyenji and passed it to the employee. Take this to pay the bill. In the blink of an eye, he had already exchanged his black credit card for the employee and held Gunyenji's card in his palm. Reinitz's movements were so fast it was like magic. Neither Gunyenji nor the employee noticed that the credit card in the employee's hand had actually been exchanged. Okay, thank you both. The employee took the black credit card and walked into the store. He found a brand new Veru chain bag from the storeroom and took it out along with the dustproof bag. He then swiped his card at the counter to pay the bill and brought it over for Gunyenji to sign. The credit card number on the bill was replaced with XXXXX for safety reasons. Chapter 657. Therefore, Gunyenji didn't even realize it wasn't her card. She casually signed her name, and Reinitz didn't say a word and pretended nothing had happened. When the clerk returned the card, Reinitz took it and replaced it with Gunyenji's credit card before returning it to her. He took his own card back. As for Gunyenji's signature, no one would pursue it as long as Reinitz didn't object. The credit card company would only refuse to pay if the customer didn't approve of the signature. As soon as the bag was bought, Reinitz took it out of the dustproof bag and removed the label. He directly put the contents of the black plastic bag Gunyenji was carrying into the new small bag. Gunyenji slung it over her left shoulder and looked very matching with her dress. Only then was Reinitz satisfied and took her to St. Joseph's Hospital to see Mother Hannah. They took a taxi to the entrance of the hospital. After getting out, Gunyenji looked up at the tall hospital building and asked Reinitz nonchalantly, "Since you're so rich, why did you take a taxi?" Reinitz shrugged and said nonchalantly, "I wanted to hide it from you but you saw through me. I'll get someone to drive my car over later." Gunyenji was furious. "I saw through you? Can you be any more fake?" She treated Reinitz as a friend who had gone through thick and thin with her. Even if he was hiding something from her, it was an indisputable fact that he had saved her. But was there a need to hide something so blatantly? Reinitz was amused by her and bowed slightly to her. He said very gentlemanly, "It was my fault. Sirius, don't be angry." Gunyenji pursed her lips and thought about what reason she had to be unhappy with him. She had a lot to hide from him too. "I'm not angry. Let's go see Mother Hannah." Gunyenji didn't want to continue the topic and urged him to go see Mother Hannah at the hospital. Reinitz took her into the hospital and found Mother Hannah's room. It was also a single room, but it wasn't as big or luxurious as Gunyenji's. It was a very ordinary room and Mother Hannah was sleeping on a bed in the middle of the room. Her forehead and wrist were wrapped in white bandages. Gunyenji felt bad and asked Reinitz quietly, "Didn't you say Mother Hannah was fine?" "She was fine. He was obviously injured." Reinitz shrugged. "It's just a minor injury. I was burned by the fire but it's not serious." Gunyenji glanced at him and walked to Mother Hannah's bedside. She reached out to hold her hand and sighed in relief when she felt that it was still warm and dry. Perhaps her movement had woken Mother Hannah. Mother Hannah opened her eyes and frowned in confusion when she saw Gunyenji. Then she saw Reinitz behind Gunyenji and immediately smiled. "Reinitz, you're here?" Reinitz walked over and casually placed a hand on Gunyenji's shoulder. "Mother Hannah, are you feeling better?" Mother Hannah nodded. "I'm fine but the doctor won't let me leave the hospital. Tell them I want to go home. Stay here for a few more days. We'll talk about it after you've recovered." Reinitz tucked her in and said, "She's serious. Don't you remember Mother Hannah?" "She's serious." Mother Hannah exclaimed in surprise and reached out to Gunyenji. "Come to Mother Hannah. You look so beautiful in a dress. Mother Hannah doesn't recognize you at all." Gunyenji walked over with a smile. "I thought you forgot about me. I'm going to cry in front of you." "How could I? I even asked Reinitz over the phone how you were. Reinitz told me you were fine and that I was only reassured when you were with him." He winked at Gunyenji to say, "I understand." Gunyenji was speechless. "Mother Hannah, don't think too much." Reinitz smiled and removed his arm from Gunyenji's shoulder. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and said, "Sirius has been unconscious for the past few days. She said she wanted to see Mother Hannah as soon as she woke up today." "What a good girl." Mother Hannah was overjoyed. She grabbed Gunyenji's hand and refused to let go. "Sirius, are you feeling better?" You have to take care of yourself. I'm fine. Don't worry, Mother Hannah. I'm all better now. Gunyanji smiled and held her hand. I'm relieved to see that you're fine today. Even if I go home, I can go home in peace. Hearing that Gunyanji wanted to go home, Mother Hannah's expression froze for a moment. She quickly glanced at Reinitz and saw that he was unmoved. She pursed her lips into a smile and said to Gunyanji, Isn't Berlin good? Isn't Reinitz good? Why don't you stay here for a few more days? When Mother Hannah recovers, I'll be able to play with you in Berlin. Gunyanji smiled and thanked her but tactfully said, Mother Hannah, I've already been out for a long time. If I don't go back soon, my family will be worried. I see. Mother Hannah's eyes were very disappointed, but she still let go of Gunyanji's hand and nodded. I know. Home is indeed very important. Gunyanji didn't know what to say. At that moment, the nurse opened the door and came in to help. The patient is about to have an injection. Please leave for now. Reinitz took Gunyanji's hand and walked out of Mother Hannah's room. They waited in the hallway. The two of them looked at the scenery outside the window and didn't speak. After a long time, Reinitz finally said, You really want to leave? Gunyanji nodded and tactfully said, Yes, I've been away from home for a long time. If I don't go back soon, my family will be worried. Really? Reinitz's smile disappeared from his face. He looked at her from the corner of his eye, and the expression in his dark blue eyes was extremely complicated. Then we'll talk about it when you're fully recovered. If you go out like this, aren't you afraid that the people who want to kill you will find you again? Of course Gunyanji was afraid, but was she going to hide here and not go back? Absolutely not. However, what Reinitz said made some sense. She couldn't be too stubborn and leave here only to be caught again. No matter what, Reinitz was still considered a gentleman. He was 100 times better than that B*TCH Seth. Gunyanji narrowed her eyes and thought about it for a while before saying hesitantly, Then what should I do? But I really want to go home. How about this, you stay here and recuperate first. When you're fully recovered, I'll take you home, okay? Reinitz's expression softened, and his features weren't as cold as they had been. Gunyanji sensibly knew that she couldn't go against Reinitz, so she nodded obediently. Okay, thank you, Reinitz. Good girl. Reinitz patted her head and suddenly heard the door behind him open. He let go and turned to see the nurse who had given Mother Hannah the injection come out. Reinitz took Gunyanji back to Mother Hannah's room. Mother Hannah looked very tired and almost fell asleep on the hospital bed. Seeing Reinitz bring Gunyanji in, Mother Hannah nodded slightly at them and mumbled, You guys get along well. I'm going to sleep for a while. Then she fell asleep. After Gunyanji and Reinitz said goodbye to Mother Hannah, they took her back to Charlotte Hospital. When they left the hospital, Reinitz didn't call someone to drive him over. He still called a taxi and Gunyanji didn't say anything. It was just a joke, so she wouldn't pursue such a small matter. When they returned to Charlotte Hospital, Gunyanji obediently went back to her room and slept. She waited for the specialist to come over 3 times a day to examine her. All of her data was perfect. After 2 days, the specialist once again requested a blood test for Gunyanji. Reinitz wasn't in the room this time, so Gunyanji faced the 3 excited doctors alone. They looked at her like she was a lab rat. Gunyanji was extremely unhappy. She wrapped herself tightly in the blanket and only revealed her head. She yelled, Go away. I'm all cured. I don't want to draw blood. It's just a routine blood test. It won't hurt. If you're afraid of pain, I'll give you anesthesia. A male doctor in his 40s looked at her almost greedily. He held a thick syringe in his hand, just like the kind used to give anesthesia to animals. He reached over to lift her blanket. Gunyanji was furious. She kicked the blanket up and wrapped it around the doctor's left hand. Then she grabbed the doctor's right hand that was holding the large syringe and stabbed it into his body. The doctor screamed as he was stabbed by the anesthetic needle in his hand. The pain made his fingers instinctively shrink back, and he injected most of the anesthetic into his body. His scream stopped abruptly. His entire body shrunk to the ground and lay there motionless. The other 2 doctors were older. When they saw Gunyanji and the male doctor fighting, they hid far away and didn't dare come over to help. Gunyanji took advantage of this opportunity to jump off the bed barefooted and run to the windowsill. She held the window frame with one hand and supported herself with the other. One leg was already hanging outside the windowsill. Gunyanji looked out the window and immediately felt dizzy. Her room was on the 18th floor. If you come any closer, I'll jump. I mean what I say. Gunyanji's stubbornness surfaced. She wouldn't compromise at all. She clung to the window frame, her long hair draped over her back and fluttering in the wind outside. Her small face was whiter than the white hospital gown she wore. The two older doctors were terrified. They quickly waved their hands and blurted out a series of German words for her to come down. Gunyenji understood a few words, but still insisted on saying in English, "Get out. Get out now." The two bodyguards outside the door heard the commotion in the room. They pushed the door open and immediately pulled out their guns to aim at Gunyenji. Gunyenji was so angry that she laughed. She simply stood on the windowsill and shouted, "Come on, shoot here, or I'll jump." The two doctors were really anxious now. They rushed up together and hugged the arms of the two bodyguards that were holding the guns. They said repeatedly, "Don't shoot. Don't shoot. She's very precious. Absolutely don't shoot." The two bodyguards quickly said, "Let go. It's very easy to misfire like this." Bang. As they spoke, one of the bodyguards accidentally fired his gun and hit the leg of the doctor who was lying on the ground. But even with such a gunshot wound, the doctor lay motionless on the ground. Gunyenji was secretly shocked. This anesthetic was too powerful. If they really injected it into her body, she shuddered and felt that it would be better to die. As soon as the gunshots rang out, more people rushed in from outside. Reinitz was the last to come in. He had only gone out for a meeting. When he came back, he went to a 4-star Michelin restaurant in Berlin to buy some delicious white sausages. When he came back, he found Gunyenji's room in a mess. He looked up and saw Gunyenji standing on the large windowsill in the room. The window was very high as half the wall. Gunyenji stood on it, her white hospital gown puffed up in the wind. Her long hair was flying in the wind, and her bare feet were like white jade. She stepped on the black marble windowsill, like a blooming epiphyllum on a black base. It made people's hearts tighten. "Get out." Reinitz didn't even have time to put down the lunchbox in his hand and yelled. As soon as they heard his voice, the bodyguards left in an instant. Only the two older doctors and the middle-aged male doctor who was lying motionless on the ground were left. "You guys get out too." Reinitz spoke German to them and even kicked the middle-aged male doctor who was lying unconscious on the ground. "Take him away." The two older doctors looked at each other and didn't seem to dare disobey Reinitz. They walked over and carried the middle-aged male doctor who had accidentally injected himself with the anesthetic away. Reinitz put down the lunchbox in his hand and kicked the door shut with a loud bang. He walked steadily to the windowsill and extended his hands to Gunyenji. His voice was extremely gentle. "Come, Sirius, come to me." Gunyenji refused and leaned against the window. Tears welled up in her dark eyes, but she still stubbornly raised her head and said to Reinitz, "If you want to take my blood again, I'll jump down from here." Reinitz stared into Gunyenji's eyes and continued to walk steadily towards her. He extended his left hand and said in an even more gentle voice, "Don't be afraid. I promise no one will take your blood. When has Reinitz ever lied to you?" Gunyenji was speechless. She looked at Reinitz in a daze and opened her mouth, but didn't dare to speak. In this place, the only person she could rely on was Reinitz. Although he wasn't much better than those people, as long as he was a little better, she could only listen to him. Reinitz finally walked to the window and stopped, still holding out his hand. "Sirius, come down." Gunyenji began to sob. Slowly she let go of the window frame. Reinitz took a step forward and directly hugged her waist to pull her down from the windowsill. Gunyenji was held tightly in his arms. He gently patted her back to slowly calm her nerves. He carried her to the bed and covered her with the blanket. He said, "I'm going to close the window. The weather is already getting cold. You'll catch a cold if the wind blows." Gunyenji watched him walk to the windowsill and lock the window with a click. She closed her eyes. She knew that Reinitz had locked the window as well. Reinitz gently stroked her long hair. His dark blue eyes stared intently at her large, dark eyes. His expression was gentle and affectionate, but his voice was a little tense. "Promise me that you won't do such a dangerous thing again." Gunyenji leaned against the pillow, her face full of despair. "No, I can't promise you unless you let me go." Reinitz's hand paused for a moment, then he gently moved it away. His voice calmed down. "Of course you can go, but you have to wait until you're better." "I'm already better," Gunyenji said anxiously. "Reinitz, I beg you. Let me go. I'll try my best." Reinitz looked at her with a complicated expression. He stood up and turned to leave Gunyenji's ward. There were several more bodyguards outside Gunyenji's ward. There were now 8 people patrolling outside her ward daily. They were all armed bodyguards. The doctors who wanted to take her blood for a blood test didn't come either. Gunyanji was alone in the ward. She couldn't do anything other than read the newspapers and magazines that those people gave her. She couldn't go online, make phone calls, watch TV, or go out. Her ruddy little face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. She ate less and became even thinner. Even the smallest size of the hospital gown was empty on her body, as if it could be blown away by the wind. Gunyanji racked her brains to think of a way to escape the ward, but the windows were sealed shut. There were 8 bodyguards outside the door 24 hours a day. No one came to see her except Reinitz. Gunyanji saw that Reinitz came to accompany her every day. She asked him curiously, "Reinitz, don't you have to go to work?" Reinitz shook the newspaper in his hand. "I resigned." Gunyanji was speechless. "Resigned? Really?" she asked doubtfully. "What do you do for a living?" But Reinitz accompanied her every day. How could he have time to go to work? "I used to be a computer software engineer. Now I'm..." Reinitz looked at her with a smile. "Serious full-time caregiver." Gunyanji pursed her lips and muttered, "Who would believe that?" But she didn't continue to argue with Reinitz. It wasn't that she didn't have doubts, but she was unfamiliar with this place. At least Reinitz had saved her, so it was much safer to be with him than with anyone else. And with Reinitz around, at least she didn't have to worry about someone injecting her with the large syringe that was used to administer anesthesia to animals. That day, after Gunyanji finished breakfast, she picked up a German dictionary and compared it to a large German law textbook. Reinitz said he was going to accompany Mother Hannah to complete the discharge procedures and probably send her home. He didn't come back all night. The door to the ward was suddenly pushed open, and several people wearing black German military uniforms walked in. The last person to walk in was wearing knee-high boots. He was tall and had long legs. His face was cold and handsome. He was much more treacherous than Reinitz and had a sinister look on his face. The epaulets on this person's shoulders were silver-white with 3 four-pointed stars and a silver-white corolla decoration. The other people's epaulets were golden with 2 silver-white arrowheads in the middle. The person with 3 stars on his shoulder was definitely their leader. Chapter 658. Gunyanji had some understanding of Germany's military ranks. She knew that the silver background with 3 stars and a silver corolla decoration was the rank of colonel in the army. 09 small say net. The other epaulets were just golden bands with 2 silver arrows in the middle. They were the rank of staff sergeant. They were probably the soldiers under the colonel's command. Gunyanji glanced at them and looked away. She continued to sit on the sofa and read. The colonel walked in front of her with his hands behind his back. He extended his hand and introduced himself in English. "I am ALS, the director of the German Federal Intelligence Agency. I have the rank of colonel." Gunyanji slowly looked up and glanced at the man's outstretched hand. She had no intention of shaking it and replied in English, "I don't know you. You came to the wrong door." "Wrong door?" "Ah." ALS laughed and sat on the sofa across from Gunyanji. He clasped his white-gloved hands together and looked at her with interest. Gunyanji? That's your real name, right?" Gunyanji's entire body trembled. Although she was still looking at the textbooks in front of her, her hands were already shaking. How did this person know her real name? She had always told the nuns at the convent, as well as Reinitz and Mother Hannah, that her name was Sirius. The man saw Gunyanji's expression suddenly change and smiled even more sinisterly. He bent forward slightly and reached out with his white-gloved hand to lift Gunyanji's chin and force her to look up at him. "Miss Gu, didn't your family teach you to look people in the eyes when talking to them? Is that considered polite?" Gunyanji forcefully moved her chin away from the man's hand and closed her eyes. She said angrily, "My family only taught me to be polite to polite people. There's no need to be polite to people without manners." "You're saying I have no manners? How dare you?" The man didn't seem angry and enjoyed the game of cat and mouse. His hand clamped down on Gunyanji's chin again. "Be a good girl and come with us. Otherwise..." Before he finished speaking, the door to the room was slammed open again. Reinitz rushed in panting. His slightly brown face was flushed from running, and his blue eyes narrowed. His gaze moved from Al's hand to Gunyanji's face. "Let her go." Reinitz spoke in German as he slowly walked over and pushed the man's hand away. He pulled Gunyanji up from the sofa and hid her behind him. "Alice, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? You hid her here and made me look for a long time. Reinitz, even though we're friends, this is business. Please don't stop me." I'm going to take her to my department and interrogate her. Ellis raised his head. Reinitz, you're not from our department. Don't get involved. Gu Nianji pricked up her ears to listen to them speak German. Thanks to her crazy learning these past few days, she could understand most of it, but she still pretended that she didn't understand. His dark eyes looked back and forth between ALS and Reinitz. Reinitz looked at Gu Nianji and changed to English. No, Alice, you can't take her to your place. You're not going to my place? But she doesn't want to follow you. She looks like she wants to run away at any moment. Can you bear it? Alice folded his hands behind his back and walked around Gu Nianji. He said in English, Miss Gu, what do you say? Gu Nianji put down her book and asked calmly, Say what? I don't understand. 09 small say net. Reinitz looked at her with a complicated expression. The hospital said you've completely recovered and don't need to stay in the hospital anymore. So you have two choices now. One is to go back to the Federal Intelligence Agency with me. The other is to go with Reinitz to his house, but he can guarantee that you won't run away. ALS pouted at Reinitz. Gu Nianji's mind was a mess. What the hell was this German Federal Intelligence Agency? How did they know her true identity? Or did they want to capture her to threaten Huaxiao? She guessed that the Federal Intelligence Agency was similar to the Wuxia Empire's Special Task Force or Huaxiao's Special Operations Forces. That would be Huaxiao's old enemy. Gu Nianji looked down to reveal her snow-white neck. Going to the Federal Intelligence Agency or going to Reinitz's house? Was there even a need to choose? Were they really not forcing her to go to Reinitz's house? Gu Nianji pursed her lips. When she looked up again, her expression was already timid. She tugged at the corner of Reinitz's shirt. Reinitz, I'll go with you. Reinitz slowly pulled his hand back and held the hand Gu Nianji was using to tug at his shirt. That hand was soft and smooth. His heart gradually calmed down, and his heart was filled with peace and joy. He wanted to hold her hand. Even if he knew she was lying to him, Reinitz knew what kind of person Gu Nianji was much better than ALS. Actually, seeing the timid expression on her delicate and intelligent face made him want to laugh. If he hadn't seen Gu Nianji on the Alps with his own eyes and killed the enemy's motorcycle with just one bullet, he would definitely have been fooled by her little appearance. Reinitz didn't bat an eyelid, but there was a strange feeling in his heart. He actually liked to see her act like a helpless little bird to him. Are you sure you want to go with Reinitz? Ellis saw the two of them holding hands from the corner of his eye. He nonchalantly turned his head to look at the sealed window and smiled. Who are you to him? How can he take my target away from my hands? The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched. Her mind quickly pondered what ALS meant. Did you hear that? Who are you to him? How can he take you away? ALS turned around and asked Gu Nianji's face. According to the law, only immediate family members have the right to take away the person in my hands. Gu Nianji's heart sank. Immediate family? How could a man and a woman who weren't related be considered immediate family? Only husband and wife could be considered immediate family? What kind of joke was this? Gu Nianji's face flushed. Just as she was about to shake off Reinitz's hand, he instinctively held her tightly and said to Alice, Don't scare her. She's already my fiancée. If she goes with me, I guarantee she'll stay in Germany. Gu Nianji's eyes widened and she quickly shook her head. Reinitz pulled her into his embrace and pressed her head tightly against it. He whispered in her ear. Expedient measures. You shut up. Gu Nianji knew it was fake, but she still felt uneasy. Also, why would she stay in Germany? She was a citizen of the Wuxia Empire. She had to go back. She still had things to do. She poked Reinitz's chest unwillingly to get him to let go of her. 09 small say net. Reinitz let go of her and used his eyes to tell her not to talk anymore. Gu Nianji could only purse her lips and turn around to hide behind him. She hung her head and didn't look at the two men anymore. Ellis shifted his gaze to Reinitz and sneered. You guarantee it? What guarantee do you have? Your life? Reinitz didn't speak for a long time. His porcelain-like handsome face had a solemn expression. He nodded slowly. Yes, my life. I guarantee it with my life that she won't leave Germany. Gu Nianji suddenly raised her head and stared at Reinitz's back. Her gaze was so intense that it seemed like she wanted to burn a hole in his back. She wanted to struggle, but Reinitz reached out and held her hand even more tightly. The meaning in his hand was self-evident. He wanted her to calm down and not speak nonsense. He wanted her to entrust everything to him. But how could Gu Nianji entrust everything to a man she had known for less than 10 days? There was only one person she truly trusted with all her heart in this life. There was no second person. However, Alice was eyeing her like a tiger watching its prey. Gunyanji also knew the severity of the situation. If she wasn't careful, she would be placed under house arrest by the Federal Intelligence Agency. If that happened, she really wouldn't be able to do anything. Therefore, she didn't say anything. However, she decided to find a chance to have a good talk with Reinitz. Not only was it expedient to say that she was his fiancée, but she also wouldn't stay in Germany. Also, Al's words were completely unreasonable. She wouldn't listen to him. Ignoring Reinitz's warning gaze, Gunyanji stubbornly raised her head and said to Alice, "Colonel, what you're doing is unreasonable and illegal. I'm not a German citizen. You're forcefully keeping me in Germany. This is illegal detention. My family and country will not let you off." Alice suddenly turned around and walked in front of Reinitz. He pushed him away and sneered at Gunyanji, who was standing behind Reinitz. "You're talking about the law with me? Do you know who I am? Do you know what organization I work for?" "I don't care who you are or what organization you work for. This is a time of peace and the Wuxia Empire and Germany are not at war. You have no right to place another country's citizen under house arrest. Even though you're a colonel, I still have to say that you're ignorant of the law. Do you think you can't break the law just because you're a colonel? Do you think you're above the law just because you're a Federal Intelligence Agency official? Do you dare say that to your parliament, government, and citizens?" Gunyanji raised her head slightly. She wasn't afraid at all. Alice looked at her and suddenly burst into laughter. "Ah. As expected of our Federal Intelligence Agency's A-rank target. You have guts. You have knowledge. And eloquence. But Miss Gu, did you know? No one has ever dared to speak to me like that. Do you want to be the first? But I don't like to be lectured by others like that. Tell me, do you want to die?" Gunyanji shook her head in disdain. "So what? Kill me if you have the guts." "Kill you? Do you know that as long as I want to, I can make you suffer 1,000 times worse than death?" Alice took a step forward and grabbed Gunyanji's chin again. This time he used 50% of his strength. Gunyanji's chin was immediately swollen from his grip. Reinitz couldn't bear to watch from the side and grabbed Al's hand. "That's enough. Alice, you have my word. I'll do what I say. Why are you making things difficult for her?" Alice let go. Gunyanji rubbed her chin and glared at him. She thought to herself, "I'm not a gentleman if I don't get my revenge. As long as I can make it back alive, I'll definitely get my revenge. What are you looking at? Do you really think I don't dare to hit you?" Alice glared at her as well. "I can kill you and bury you in the mountains. Do you think anyone will come to me for you?" Gunyanji gave him a look of disdain. If it was really that simple, they would have killed her in the mountains a long time ago. "I'm right here and I'm unarmed. It's not strange if you want to kill me. The Germans were able to start 2 world wars. Do they need a reason to kill a woman and a child? What a joke." Gunyanji rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. She brought up the most important historical fact that the Germans couldn't touch. As expected, whether it was ALS or Reinitz, their expressions were especially ugly. However, no one argued with her. Even the sergeants looked at each other uneasily. It was obvious that their morale was shaken. Gunyanji was even more certain now. These people were German soldiers and government officials. They wouldn't be like the mercenaries who chased her in the Alps and didn't care about the consequences or their reputation as long as they could kill her. These people wouldn't kill her. They weren't after her life. Gunyanji's mind raced as she analyzed Al's psychological state of mind. Alice was almost speechless from her rebuke. He glanced at Reinitz, then covered his mouth with his fist, cleared his throat and said, "All right, no matter how glib your tongue is, I don't care. Tell me, Reinitz's fiancée. Will you go to jail with me or will you go to his house with Reinitz?" He added, "But remember, if you run away, I'm going to jail with Reinitz." Reinitz pursed his lips and looked away. It was like he didn't hear what ALS said. Of course, Gunyanji wouldn't go to jail. She snorted and said, "If you go to jail, why do you want me to go with you? Of course I'm going with Reinitz." ALS was furious. He raised his hand and swung it at Gunyanji's face. He didn't expect this woman to have such a sharp tongue. She deserved a beating. Reinitz grabbed Al's arm and warned him, "Stop it. That's enough." Alice angrily pushed Reinitz away. He lowered his head and walked out in a huff. His subordinates dispersed in an instant. Only Gunyanji and Reinitz were left in the ward. The bodyguards at the door retracted their necks and closed the door for them. Gunyanji closed her eyes and felt her legs go weak. She fell onto the sofa and couldn't speak for a long time. When Reinitz saw it, he realized that the young girl was just putting on a strong front. She was just putting on a strong front. However, her words had indeed given him a great shock. In the face of power, most people would choose to submit and some would choose to resist. Only she chose to follow the law. Reinitz looked at her with a complicated expression. After a while he took out his phone and made a call. He then took out a bucket of iced milk from the fridge. He poured a cup and warmed it in the microwave before bringing it over to her. "Drink some milk." Gu Nianji took it and finished it in one gulp. She held the empty cup and still didn't speak. Reinitz stood beside her with a cup of coffee in one hand and looked at the scenery outside the window. His voice was very gentle. "Sirius, come with me to my house. I will protect you." Gu Nianji's lips twitched. She wanted to say that she didn't need his protection. She just wanted him to let her go home. But if she left Reinitz now, what awaited her was ALS bringing her back to the Federal Intelligence Agency. She would never see the light of day again. Gu Nianji looked up at Reinitz's religiously handsome profile and his expression as if all the happiness in the world had nothing to do with him. She sighed softly and said, "Reinitz, thank you." Reinitz nodded slightly and began packing Gu Nianji's things in the ward. She had been here for 7 to 8 days and had accumulated a lot of things. Of course, Reinitz had bought them for her. Soon after, someone knocked on the door. Reinitz opened the door. Gu Nianji turned to see that someone had delivered 2 large suitcases. The LV brand was sturdy and durable. It was a must-have for home travel. Gu Nianji said to Reinitz, "Do you have that many things? Do you really need 2 suitcases?" Reinitz didn't say anything. He pursed his thin lips and helped her pack everything into the suitcases. They really did pack 2 large suitcases. Gu Nianji was speechless. How embarrassing. She actually misjudged him. Reinitz held Gu Nianji's hand as they walked out of the ward. A bodyguard came in at the door and followed them with the 2 suitcases. Gu Nianji asked Reinitz, "Have you paid for the hospital fees?" Reinitz glanced at her. "If not, will you pay for it?" "I think ALS should pay for it or the German government should pay for me." Gu Nianji shrugged. "You guys are holding me hostage here. Are you not even willing to pay for the hospital fees? Aren't you being too stingy?" Reinitz felt it was a bit strange to hear that. He walked a few steps and looked straight ahead. "No one is holding you hostage. You need our protection here. If we let you go, you'll be hunted down in a few days." Gu Nianji frowned. "Reinitz, I didn't expect you to speak the same language as ALS." She felt like her freedom was still restricted. It was just that her prison warden had changed from Al's prison warden to Reinitz. Reinitz laughed. "ALS must be very happy to hear you say that." Gu Nianji pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She followed him to the parking lot. Reinitz walked to a red Aston Martin and opened the door. He smiled at Gu Nianji. "This is my car. You don't have to take a taxi." When Reinitz took Gu Nianji to another hospital to visit Mother Hannah, they had called a taxi. At the time, Gu Nianji had even asked him if he had his own car. Gu Nianji looked at the flashy, luxurious sports car and then at Reinitz. She shook her head. "I didn't expect you to be like this, Reinitz." Reinitz was speechless. He wasn't a lecherous person, didn't drink, didn't gamble, and didn't do drugs. How could he not drive a good car with this little hobby? The 2 of them sat in the car, and the bodyguard put the 2 suitcases in the SUV in the back. They followed the Aston Martin out of the Charlotte Hospital parking lot and drove to the outskirts of Berlin. The 2 cars turned onto the highway out of the city and arrived in front of a beautiful country villa in half an hour. The house wasn't very big, but it was much bigger than Mother Hannah's house. That you're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.